Good morning. I now call the May 31st, 2023 Special Administrative Briefing and Work Session of the Marion County School Board to order at 9:00 a.m. Please silence your electronic devices to avoid disturbing others. I'll now ask our school board attorney to explain the rules governing this meeting. Good morning, Attorney Powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This work session is a public meeting as defined in Florida's Sunshine Law. The board is dedicated to full transparency in its meetings and its work. In compliance with the Sunshine Law, the board has adopted uniform meeting procedures, including the right for citizens to participate. The board will allow public comment regarding any work session item listed on today's agenda at the appropriate time. Speakers must fill out a request form located in the lobby and hand it to the board clerk. After the board and superintendent have completed their discussion on a particular agenda item, the board clerk will call speakers' names in the order received. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. As required by the Sunshine Law, the board must maintain orderly conduct and proper decorum throughout the meeting. Speakers may criticize subject matter and decisions in a respectful manner, but not people. Finally, speakers must be very careful not to violate the privacy rights of others, especially students and their family members, by mentioning their names or other identifying information. Thank you for your attention to these important rules.
Thank you, Attorney Powers. We'll now begin the work session with the superintendent's administrative briefing. Good morning, Dr. Gullett.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I do not have any additional items today for the briefing, so with your permission, Madam Chair, I'll just introduce our topic today. And Ms. Dobbins will lead us off, but this is a follow-up from yesterday's presentation from our consultant from our long-range planning survey results. And so today we have quite a bit of information to share with regard to school and district needs and information that we took from that plan and would like to discuss with you today. So thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Dobbins.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Dr. Campbell, school board members, and Superintendent Dr. Gullett. As we prepare for our slideshow, we'll get started. Perfect. You ready? All right, good morning again. Yesterday, Benesh Consultants presented a very comprehensive report on our long-range plan and impact fee study. Today, based on the findings from that study, we will be making recommendations for school facilities. We will also follow with recommendations for district facilities and then conclude with current and potential funding sources. We begin with a review of the projected population and residential developments that was presented by Benesh. So the slide before you is a slide from that presentation. If you see the black lines that dissect the county into 4 quadrants, the horizontal line is running from State Road 40, dissecting north and south, and then you see the other line, 301 and 441, dividing us into 4 quadrants. The gold circles are the residential units that are projected to be developed in the next 5 years. These are the most important circles for the now on what we need to really focus on. However, as the circle gets bigger, the more dense the population of residential units is projected. Then you see the green squares. As they get bigger, also those are more dense residential units, but those are the projections for years 6 through 10. And then your blue diamonds are the projections 10 years out. The larger the diamond, the more dense the population. The stars, the bigger the stars, again, the more dense the population, are within the city locations. If you look at the shades of purple, the lighter the color purple, the less population change, and then it increases to the darkest purple, which you see through the corridor that kind of runs diagonal. That darkest purple represents the population change within the next 22 years up to 2045, and it could be as projected as high as almost 44,000 new residential developments. So Benesh's focus is concentrated in that southwest corridor, but I do want to point out that today's presentation looks at the entire district, so we're not going to rule out the development you see in the northeast quadrant, where you can see the now, which is the gold circles, and then the future developments of the green and blue, and then also the south side of our district, south and southeast side of our district. When we last had impact fees, besides building new schools and wings, we also purchased land for future school sites. You have this map in a larger size at your area so that you can refer back. You can see that these land purchases are designated by school site A, B, C, and so forth. We do own these properties. This was a well thought out plan, because if you were to overlay this with the intensity of development on the previous map, you can see that we really strategically purchased some land in preparation for today's discussion. We're going to first begin with elementary needs in the next 5 years. Benesh, on the high end of 3,500 new residential units per year, with minimizing the use of portable, recommends 3 new schools. These 3 schools are depicted in the areas located by the gold stars. Again, they are not pinpointing an exact location, but referencing the area in which they believe those schools should be located. What we did is we combined all the recommendations. As you recall from yesterday's presentation, we have, since 1990 to current 2021, we have an average of 2,800 permits per year. So that is one scenario. We're going to look at 2,800 on the low end, which means we would use more portables. 2,800 on the high end, we would use less portables. However, from 2017 to 2021, our average permitting has been 3,500 per year. So that's the high-end look to this. Again, low meaning using more portables, and high. So when you combine all of those 4 scenarios, Benesh recommends a range of 0 elementary schools to 3 elementary schools in the next 5 years. What we will propose in the next slides is that we will propose in the next 5 years that we build 2 schools and 2 wings. Our first school that we recommend would be located in the northwest side of Marion Oaks, as depicted on the map. We would target the year 25-26 to open the school. The estimated cost as of today is around $42.5 million, with an approximate seat count of 860 students. By building this school in this location, we would be providing overcrowding relief to Sunrise, Marion Oaks, and Hammett Bowen Elementary School. We would also recommend at the same time that we build a new school in the Winding Oaks area. Again, we would target the opening date of year 25-26 with an estimated cost of $42.5 million, and again, an estimated student station of 860. This would relieve overcrowding at Saddlewood, Hammett Bowen, and some at Shady Hill, and we would have a trickle effect from there. So we are able to remove some from Shady Hill, then we can look at Bellevue Santos and begin that trickle effect of rezoning. We are recommending that both of these schools open during the same time because we would like to rezone our students once. We've done minor rezoning just recently in this area, and we do not want to impact students multiple times in their elementary career by moving them several times. We also recommend in the next 5 years 2 wings. One of those wings would be located at Hammett Bowen Elementary School. By opening the new schools earlier and relieving Hammett Bowen, we would be able to remove some portables. As you can see on the map, the yellow rectangle overlays some portables. Those would be removed, and then we would build a 16 classroom wing and expand the cafeteria. This would add an estimated additional seats of 288 to 352, depending on which class size we're using, which classrooms we're putting in that new wing. And this would bring the school capacity to either 1,112 to 1,176. We would target opening this wing in year 28-29. And in the same year, we would target opening a wing at Marion Oaks Elementary School. Again, this would be a 16 classroom wing with cafeteria expansion with the same additional seat range of 288 to 352, increasing their school capacity between 1,275 to 1,339. So by the end of the first 5 years, we will have built 2 elementary schools and 2 wings at 2 different elementary schools in that time span. Now let's look at our middle school needs in the next 5 years. Benesh, based on the 3,500 units with minimizing portable use, recommends 1 middle school, and the star on the map represents the area in which they recommend that middle school to be built. When you look at all 4 scenarios that Benesh recommends, you see that Benesh's range is from 0 to 1 middle school in the next 5 years. Our recommendation will be to handle this through the addition of 2 wings at 2 different middle schools. The first one would be to build a wing at Liberty Middle School, depicted by the yellow on the map. This would be a 16 classroom wing with cafeteria expansion. It would increase the capacity to 352. And the school capacity overall would be 1,555. Again, because we're not building a complete school, it still would call for portable usage. Then we would follow in the next year, 26-27, opening an additional wing at Horizon Academy of Marion Oaks. Again, this would be a 16 classroom wing and cafeteria expansion, increasing 352 additional seats and bringing that school capacity to 1,526. So at the end of 5 years for middle school, we would have added 2 wings at 2 different middle schools. Next, we will look at the high schools in the next 5 years, and Benesh, based on their 3,500 minimizing portables, would recommend 1 high school indicated by the star on the map for the approximate area for that high school. Their range, when you look at all 4 scenarios, is between 0 to 1 high school in the next 5 years. Our recommendation is to build a new high school. And that new high school would be located on the east side of Marion Oaks, Site E on your map. We would slate that school to open around 27-28 school year, and at this time it would look at approximately 1,800. However, we would monitor this very closely and look to see whether we need to move that to 2,000 or even greater. This new school, which is the 3rd new school we would build, would relieve overcrowding at Westport High School, Bellevue High School, and Denellen High School. We now move into the next 10 years, and I want to reiterate numerous times during the next several slides that we will have to reassess. A pandemic changed everything for us. We don't know what the future holds. We don't know if we're going to see a slowing down of economy. We don't know if we're going to see influxes to our county. So when we make our recommendations in the 10 years and the 15 years out, please understand that we will need to reassess before we finalize those recommendations. However, as the projection stands in the next 10 years, Benesh at the high end projected that we would need a school out in the Denellen area, but again, we would reassess, and our recommendation would be, instead of adding that school, we would add 2 wings. And again, before I move off the slide, when you looked at all 4 scenarios, Benesh's recommendations was 1 to 2 schools. Again, we're recommending at this time 2 wings. Those wings would be 1 at Denellen Elementary School. We would look to add a 16 classroom wing and cafeteria expansion. It would add between 288 seats to 352 seats, and it would increase the school capacity at Denellen Elementary School from 936 to 1,000 students. We would also look to build a wing in the next 10 years at Romeo. Again, it would be a 16 classroom wing with cafeteria expansion. It would increase the seat size anywhere between 288 to 352 and would increase the school capacity anywhere between 1,058 students to 1,122. We now look at the projections for middle school and the 10-year mark. When you look at Benesh's map and their recommendation at the highest end, 3,500 units per year with minimizing the number of portables, they have no recommendations for middle school at that time. So therefore, in the 10 years, we would continue to handle the growth in the middle school areas by using portables and not recommend to build at this time. Again, we would, of course, reassess before we ever get there. We may need to turn around and say we need to move forward and bring the middle school we recommend later on board sooner. So again, that reassessment is very critical. We then look at the high school needs in the 10-year mark. And according to Benesh, at the high end, their recommendation is a new high school. The star depicts the location of that high school. You can see it in the Denellen area. When you combine the 4 scenarios, the recommendation is 0 to 1 high school in the 10-year mark, and our recommendation is going to be to add 3 wings during that time. We would add 2 wings at Denellen High School. So you'd have 2 16 classroom wings with cafeteria expansion. This would increase the seats to 400, increasing that school's capacity to 1,507. We would also move forward with building a wing at Bellevue High School. This 16 classroom wing with cafeteria expansion would also add an additional 400 seats, bringing that school's capacity to just under 2,000. Now we move even further out, which by then we would reassess multiple times before we make final decisions. But when you look at the elementary schools 15 years out at 3,500 units per year being added and minimizing portables, Benesh recommends 2 new elementary schools. They are depicted by the golden stars for the areas for which they believe those locations should be. When you look at the range from Benesh's 4 scenarios, their range is from 2 to 3 elementary schools during the 15-year mark. Our recommendation at this time is 1 school. Again, we would have multiple reassessments before making a final decision. We would locate that 1 elementary school on the southwest side of Marion Oaks, 15 years out, and we would project that this would be about 860 students. Then we look at the middle school, 15 years out, and at the high end, Benesh recommends 1 middle school. The location of that middle school is depicted on the map by the gold star in the proximate area. When you look at the range, their range in 15 years out is 0 to 1 middle school, and we would add that 1 middle school. And we would add it on the same property as the elementary school we just spoke about. So you would have a situation where we're using 1 property to build 1 middle school and 1 elementary school at the same time. That property again is on the southwest side of Marion Oaks, and we're looking at around 1,500 student stations for that middle school. 15 years out for high school, Benesh's recommendation at the high end is 0 high schools at this time. And so at this time, we have 0 recommendations to build another high school in 15 years. However, again, I just cannot say it enough that we continually have to reassess and make recommendations based on current situations. So now that we've done 5, 10, and 15 years, this is the summary of the next 5 years with cost. So these were the slides combined. You can see that in school year 25-26, we add the 2 new elementary schools, and we add the new wing at Liberty. Then in 26-27, we add the new wings and cafeteria expansions at Horizon Academy. And then 27-28, we're building a new high school. 28-29, we have new wings at Hammett and Marion Oaks Elementary School. And our estimated cost is around $208.2 million. On the left side of your screen is the summary of 10 years out prior to assessment or reassessment. This is adding the wings at Denellen Elementary, Romeo Elementary, 2 wings at Denellen High School, and 1 new wing at Bellevue High School. And the cost 10 years out is estimated at $42.3 million. On the right side of the screen, this is the summary for 15 years out prior to multiple reassessments. We're targeting 1 new elementary school and 1 new middle school on the same property, and that's Site C on your map. And that would be an estimated cost at this time of $108.7 million. As I mentioned before, Benesh's report really focuses on the high-density population, but we cannot discount what we already know our needs are on those other areas and forecasting the growth in that northeast quadrant and that south quadrant. So between years 29 and 38, we're projecting that we need to move forward with the following recommendations that currently are unfunded. And that is move forward with a new 16 classroom and cafeteria addition at Bellevue Middle. Also, a new 16 classroom building and cafeteria addition at Harborview Elementary School. Ocala Springs targeting a new 12 classroom building. Ward Highlands, a new 16 classroom building. Maplewood, 14. And we're looking at the site in the Shores area to replace, at this time, Lake Weir Middle School. These current sites are being handled at this time through portable usage, and we continue to be able to manage that. But when you look 10 to 15 years out, we need to plan for these additions. These additions would cost at this time an estimated $100.2 million. So when you take the recommendations for the additional wings and schools based on capacity limitations, overcrowding in the areas pointed out by Benesh's study, and then you take what we already know on the outlying areas that we are already having a need and forecast a need in the future, our total school facility recommendation at this time is just under $460 million. Now we are going to shift to the district facility planning. For district facility planning, as you are aware, we are opening a new warehouse that is currently under construction on the Phoenix property, and that warehouse is slated to open in October. So we are recommending that we go ahead and move forward with preparing for the sale of our old warehouse and also the adjacent lot that's used for parking to the warehouse located on the south side that is depicted on your map, outlined in blue. So again, our recommendation is to go ahead and move forward with preparing the sale of that property. We also recommend that we prepare for the sale of the former district office building. However, there is Building 2 located on the south side of the building. So the building on the north side is the former school board office and district office. The building on the south, just below that, is Building 2, and it's where we currently house part of our technology department, our state reporting offices, and our auditing offices. But the big, most important thing to note here is that in that building, we have our connections for telecommunications through fiber optics and T1 trunk lines. So we will not be able to sell this property until we solve the connection issue for telecommunications. That means that we need to disconnect from Building 2 and reconnect somewhere else so that we still continue with our telecommunications and internet services and so forth. So with that said, our recommendation is to build a new technology data center building right next to the warehouse that is currently being built. That new data center would then be able to utilize the warehouse. It relies heavily on deliveries to that warehouse, so it makes sense to continue to have it in close proximity. There are already existing fiber and T1 trunk lines that run alongside that property, so connecting to those lines, they're available to do so. We estimate the cost of that new data center to be $6.5 million, and once completed, we would relocate our technology department to that location. Again, by building this building, it removes the connectivity in Building 2 so we could move forward with selling the former district office property. We also recommend that we purchase a new central district office building that is currently on the market. This is the current property located at 1417 North Magnolia Avenue. It is just under 47,000 square feet. The asking price is $4 million, so our purchase price would be up to that amount. And we would then remodel that office space up to $10 million. Our estimate is $10 million. That's on the high end, and because we would need to do inspections and appraisals, we really do not truly know what that figure would look like. We can only estimate on the high end, so it could come back and only cost us $5 million to renovate it. But at the highest mark, we would plan for $10 million. By purchasing this, we are then able to move district staff off this current site, and we would also be able to move district staff off the Alvarez Annex offices, which is located on the 400 block of Southeast Alvarez, combining us into one district office. We would then, by moving the staff off of the property over on Alvarez, we would then be able to sell the property, and that is our recommendation, to sell that property. You can see in red that little triangle on the bottom left-hand corner is already owned by the city. What's outlined in the yellow is our property, and we would recommend to sell that so long as we're able to move the staff to a new central district office. For staff that do not see the community, in other words, they don't have a revolving door of people coming in. This could be from auditing, it could be over to programming and academics. We would leverage the space that is empty at Fordham Early Learning. That is depicted in the dark purple. Those buildings are currently sitting, some of them are empty, some of them already have district staff in them. We would preserve the central part of that campus as the Fordham Early Learning, with room to grow into the K-2 facility, academic facility we hope to grow into. Again, we would strategically relocate district staff that would not have an influx of visitors, to limit that around our Fordham Early Learning students. By utilizing all the spaces that we discussed, we would then be able to look at the academic usage of MTI and also plan for what the future of MTI and MTC looks like. However, when you look at all the recommendations for district facility planning, we do have a targeted timeline. We know that this is a lofty timeline, so it is an estimate. We do recommend that we begin the purchase process for that property at Magnolia Avenue. We post the warehouse and the adjacent vacant lot, and we begin the construction of the new technology data center building. In the winter of '24, our target would be to post the former district office for sale, begin remodeling the new central district office, and then the summer, fall of '24, relocate district staff to the central district office, which would allow us then to post and sell the annex office, and then in January, we're relocating the technology department to the new data center at the Phoenix Center. These recommendations for district facility planning would be up to $4 million to purchase the property, up to $10 million for renovations, remodeling of that new building, and then $6.5 for the building of the technology data center, and this is an approximate up to $20.5 million. So when we add it all together, when we look at our recommendations and we add the new construction, the high-density growth population that was recommended by Banesh, and then you have seen our recommendations based on that data, and then you add the new construction of the lower density growth, such as the Bellevue Middle, the Harbor View, the Ocala Springs, Ward Highlands, and Maplewood, those wings that we discussed. And then you add the new technology data center. Sorry, I skipped one. When you add also the new middle school out in the Shores area, and then you add the technology data center and the central district office. And then what we have not discussed is all the unfunded maintenance projects. So if you remove all the new construction that is currently unfunded, it leaves you with the unfunded maintenance needs. And that unfunded maintenance needs in the next 5 years is just under $300 million. We project that the estimated unfunded maintenance needs in the next 10 to 15 years would be around $336 million. As you know, over 70% of our buildings are over 30 years old. Our last school built was in 2011. When you add this entire plan of recommendations together, it comes out to just over $1.1 billion. As we look at what we could do for future facility considerations, again, we do have some assets. We do recommend, bullet number 1 is the warehouse property, followed by that adjacent land. We do recommend to sell that asset. We recommend to sell the former district office, and we recommend to sell the annex offices so far as all recommendations are accepted. We do have some smaller properties, some out by transportation and some around the area, that we can also look to leverage how we would utilize those assets in the future. I do want to state that any property, which is, I did not list because of this, but we have property such as the future sites for schools and so forth. We have property over by Vanguard High School that was purchased with previous impact fee dollars. And we cannot sell that property. We would have to return those funds back if we decide not to utilize them. So I did want to express that although these are some of our assets, we do have other properties that we could consider our assets, but we're not able to sell them because they were purchased with impact fees. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Boston Ellis, our CFO, to talk about current and potential capital funding.
So quiet in here. Good morning, Chair Campbell, board members, Superintendent Dr. Gullett. This is probably the time where we would pause and say, okay, how do we fund this?
You're
And what are the
we've been waiting to hear
possibilities?
from, Ms. Boston Ellis.
Pardon me?
You're the woman we've been waiting to hear from.
Well, because,
Dobbins, but
yeah.
welcome, Ms. Boston Ellis.
Exactly. So because we have a lot of moving parts, and I agree with Ms. Dobbins that this is an aggressive schedule in order to meet what is prescribed and recommended by Banesh. I have solicited our financial advisor, Lori Howe, and she works with PFM, has been with them many years, and she and her staff have directed us through many borrowing scenarios. So I would like to invite her up to the podium as well. When we presented this information to her, she went to work right away looking at it. So we want to talk about what our current funding sources are, and then what potential other funding sources are for the district. So we'll start with the obvious. What's available to us in terms of funding would be to sell these properties. And based on all of the movement, we really don't have an amount. We don't have an estimated amount, but those are definitely potential current funding sources. The other is our capital millage, which is the 1.5 mils, but we are restricted to only use about up to 75% of those dollars. So if, like this year, we had about $42 million in the 1.5 million, we could only borrow up to 75% of that. And we're currently at about between 35 and 40% in terms of what our debt capacity is. Also want you to keep in mind, the more money that we put towards borrowing makes it unavailable to do other things. I also want to indicate that we use the 1.5 mil to cover about $4.5 million of our needs for technical services, our maintenance needs. So that comes off the top. We also are allowed by statute to pay for our property insurance. In the past, it's been about $1.7 million, and you'll see in a presentation tomorrow, that has almost doubled estimated costs. And then we also, of course, pay existing debt. This board has been what I believe is very conservative in terms of the type of debt we get in. So to your right, you'll see our debt schedules. This is the debt that's remaining through 2029, and it's about $35 million. So all of that has to, we have to take into play when we decide how we're going to fund these projects. So I think I'll turn it over to Laura now.
Good morning. One thing I did want to point out before we go to the next slide, as Teresa had said, up to 75% can legally be borrowed to of the 1.5 mils. But something that we do take into consideration when we're issuing debt is what the credit rating would be. And the credit rating agencies do not look favorably if you borrow more than 50% of that 1.5 mils. So that would leave 50% for the PAYGO, as Teresa mentioned, all of those other uses that 1.5 mil is currently servicing as well. It also allows for, if there's potential for property taxes to decline in the future, that there's plenty of coverage to pay your debt service. So all of these factors come into consideration when we're looking at potentially issuing debt to make sure that the district remains in a very healthy financial position moving forward. So on slide 48, are you clicking? Okay. We'll look at the potential funding sources that the district currently doesn't have outside of the sale of the assets or the 1.5 capital mills. I believe that you heard yesterday about impact fees, that is an option. You can use those to pay as you go. So as they come in and collect, you can use them to pay cash to build the buildings. Or if they're not collecting in there, you could issue 1.5, use the 1.5 mils to issue your certificates of participation and use 1.5 mils and impact fees to pay that debt service if there's not enough impact fees to pay cash day one. The other funding sources that would need a referendum for voter approval, which would need to be at a general election, so the next one would be in November of 2024. The sales tax option, you have the local government infrastructure sales tax for the penny that the county currently levies for the whole 1%. That is expiring in December of 2024, so that would need to be an agreement with the county to share that 1 penny. Or the school district can go out for their own half penny for the school capital outlay surtax on their own. Again, in the November 2024 election, it would need to be brought to the voters. There is also general obligation bonds, and this is where you would go out and say these are the exact projects that we would want to fund. You know, if you go out for 200 million or so, you tell the voters it's 200 million. It does go on their ad valorem taxes, so it's paid by the property taxes of the homeowners in the county. That is another option. I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware of. And then the last option, which wouldn't provide all the funding needs for what was presented, is there is, a 2-year for operating or capital that's out there as well, but those are very minor dollars. So you're really looking at your impact fees, your half-cent sales tax, or sharing the penny with the county, or doing a general obligation bond referendum. So as was mentioned, we looked at through 2038, there's 1.1 billion of unfunded needs or new capacity needs moving forward. In the top part, you'll see the total 5-year capital needs is 842 million. So that is a pretty significant amount that the district is looking at funding over the next 5 years alone. So I'd like to point out there's 2 separate graphs, and this is the only difference between these two is what your bottom line of your funds is. One is assuming, and that is on the right-hand side, that the estimated school impact fees is at that 50% collection according with House Bill 337. And the one on the left-hand side is assuming that you're at the 3,500 units for 100% collection. And so this was just highlighting certain areas in the yellow in each of these graphs, assuming that the district did a 15-year issuance using their 1.5 mils that you already have available, that would fund $245 million in projects to be paid back over 15 years. If you went out for a 15-year sales tax referendum, you could fund on day one the $285 million of projects to get those funded now, and then you would have a remaining $185 million for pay-go cash projects over the 15 years as those receipts come in. I did show what the collections would be for 10 and 20 years as well. So the first column in all of these is if you were to bond day one to get all those projects funded so you could start building the construction of them. That's showing what those receipts are, and then the remaining piece of that is for projects that you have cash and pay-go. The total amount, I know this was discussed yesterday's presentation as well, as the overall sales tax collections of the over 500 million over 15 years. That is what this links up to, but when you're borrowing, obviously there's interest cost involved, and so that's why the project different is a little bit different than what might have been shown in the presentation yesterday. If you wait to receive all the sales taxes they come in, you would have to wait to collect them to be able to fund those projects. That's why school districts borrow, so that they can get those buildings started now on the sales tax. And then you would have the impact fees for pay-go, or as I said, you could utilize those to pay back debt service that you issued with your 1.5 mils through the certificates of participation as well. So if you were to receive the 100% collection in a 15-year sales tax referendum, a 15-year certificates of participation bonding issue, you would get the 1.2 billion. If you were only at the 50% of the impact fee collections according to House Bill 337 with all those other same assumptions, you would be at 1 billion. So just want to show the difference. A lot of times it's said, the school district has the funds available through the 1.5 mils. This clearly is outlining that those funds are not fully there to be able to support all the needs. So different options are available for the district to make up that gap in funds. So I'll turn it back over to Teresa.
So for next steps would be to move forward with the recommendations, which would trigger really district operations to bring to the board for approval the various steps that would be included for each project. So for example, if the board decides to move forward with impact fees and school surtax, the board would have steps to take through board action. However, our CFO and her department would have to do the loan procurement part. If that is a decision to be made, that would then come to the board. And then all the construction management selection processes would come to the board for approval. In order to purchase the property on Magnolia, we would need to do a non-binding letter of intent that would come to the board for approval, and an access agreement so we can conduct appraisals and also conduct inspections. Again, all of those things would come through board action. Also, we would need to do educational spot surveys and resolutions, again, coming for board action, and then request various appraisals through board action as well. So all of those would be triggered based on what recommendations you accept today.
Thank you, Ms. Dobbins. Thank you, Ms. Boston-Ellis as well. So board, obviously this is a lot of information to process, and we're happy to answer questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gullett, and thank you to the team for giving us all of this information. It's one of those hurry up and now we're like, woo, it's a lot. We've been waiting for a long time for this, and so the days have now arrived. It's a lot. Board, who wants to start? We all have a laundry list of questions. Vice Chair, we'll start with you.
Thank you, and I'm not going to ask my questions all at once, but I'll start with my most burning one. We need an answer on House Bill 337.
Yes, Attorney Powers.
First of all, it's no longer House Bill 337. 337 was it was back in 2021. Of course, new House bills. It's been signed into law, so it's a Florida statute now. So if you look up House Bill 337, what you're going to run into is the unidentified patients in hospitals. So it's not of use there. The proper terminology used to be 163.31801, and that's under 6G. Now, this would not qualify as a new impact fee because of the fact that there was a current, though suspended, impact fee. Now, there is no case law that's specific on that point. However, the fact is you can often look to whether something could be easily avoided by, for example, saying, okay, we'll suspend it for a year and then come back and say it's a new fee. Obviously, that wouldn't work. So therefore, the length of time that we've had it suspended doesn't make a difference. It's not a new fee. Therefore, it is it's something that we'll have to go through the analysis of having a public workshop so that we can express the reasons for any extraordinary circumstances we want to use to increase the impact fees. And of course, impact fees are only one wheel on the car here, or the 18-wheeler, it might even be said. That's because those fees come specifically from developers and are passed along, to people buying new housing. They also are earmarked specifically to go toward the improvement of those new communities, those new homes who would actually be subject to them, who would be subject to those people paying the impact fee can't pay for back expense. It's for essentially new and anticipated growth, and that's why there's a study that's required. Now, the public workshops, my recommendation would be that we hold them with at least 7 days' notice and at least 7 days apart, and that those also occur in conjunction, advertised in conjunction with Marion County Board of Commissioners on their website. So we can do those public workshops here, but I would want to make sure that we reach the largest audience possible, and so that we're advertised not only on school district websites, but also that we pass along the information for advertisement through the Board of County Commissioners as well, just so that everyone has the opportunity to attend should they wish to do so. I think that covers the questions that were asked of me on this issue, unless you believe there's something more.
Thank you, because that's important information to have to continue to guide our conversation, so I appreciate it.
To confirm, we have to have 2 workshops and a board meeting.
Yeah, we would have to have two workshops in which we're discussing the reasons for, impact fee proposal to be able to meet the Florida statute of going beyond the 50% increase.
Yes.
Of course, part of that is, as of last year, there was 0, so it still counts as a new impact fee, but, it doesn't count as a brand-new impact fee, but we would be not suspending it this year, and in fact, would be looking to increase.
Got you.
Assuming there are several different plans that have been potentially submitted by Banesh and also by proposals from Ms. Dobbins here today. So some of those may include the need for extraordinary circumstances and some may not.
So to Vice Chair Thrower's point, I believe, to be able to meet the timeline to be on the Board of County Commissions meeting for June 20th, we would have to have 2
We're not gonna make June 20th. There would not be a way for us to meet June 20th in order to say that there is in order to achieve a increase of extraordinary circumstances. We have to be able to show extraordinary circumstances if what the goal is to be able to increase impact fees beyond the rate that they cited that we're currently.
I understand.
set for it.
The parameters you just set forth were 2 workshops, 7 days apart, both with proper 7-day notice, and a board meeting.
Yes.
And yesterday, I believe Reverend Cummings was the individual who said we could presumably have a workshop and a board meeting on the same day. So we do in fact have enough days to get it accomplished before the 20th, if we set special meetings.
Sure. If you say so, I haven't looked at the.
Well, I am saying so. So on the 12th of June, which is the first day possible for us to have a workshop, because we're at FSBA at the end of next week, we could have a workshop. And then on the 19th of June, 7 days after that, we could have another workshop and board meeting, which would be before the 20th, which is the commissioners' meeting.
Possibly, Dr. James, but I would question how the Board of County Commissioners' 7-day window of posting and having the information would also be impacted.
Well, yesterday, it was shared with us that they could put a placeholder on their agenda on June 8th for this item to presumably come in front of them on the 20th. I'm just saying the dates are on the calendar. If we don't want to do it, we don't want to do it,
No,
but
of course. I also want to note that we do have a board meeting on June 13th, so it may be that we actually could hold one of the public workshops on the same day we already have a scheduled board meeting, as was recommended yesterday.
well, but they wouldn't be 7 days apart if we were going to hit the 20th timeline, which is what the attorney suggested. That's the reason I didn't suggest that.
Okay. Do we want to make that decision now, or do we want to ponder our choices
I'm fine with those dates.
with the 12th and the 19th? I think I am.
I may have a conflict.
I do agree with Ms. Conrad. I think she said yesterday we should have one in the morning and one in the evening.
And
Did
I
you
just,
say
I did, and I felt like that was the best opportunity for us to, for availability for our community to participate. If we had something in the morning, if people were trying to catch before work or after work, it would just be flexible for them.
And I'll note that these workshops are intended specifically not to deal with all broad public or capital outlay funding. It's specifically as to the exceptional circumstances issue,
And the
as
impact.
to whether that exists or not.
And the amount, I'm assuming, that
Sure, right.
is impacted in the recommendation for the extraordinary circumstances.
So the exact dates again?
It'd be the 12th and the 19th, I think is what we're looking at, to meet the
Mondays.
expectations, the attorney.
Okay, the 12th and the 19th. Okay,
And one of the 19th would presumably have a workshop and a board meeting.
And just as an alternative, just for conversation's sake, potentially would we be able to meet at 8 o'clock next Wednesday? With today being 7 days, we could try to start publication today. Possibly that doesn't work.
Said meet next Wednesday.
But before we all go to
But
conference.
you have
Already be there.
yeah, you have a leadership thing, don't you?
Already be down there.
Okay, that was my
Right, 'cause
question.
it's Tuesday.
That was my question.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I'm fine with that.
So the 12th and the 19th,
Do-
what we're saying?
Yeah, we have a little bit of time to firm up times, but we can put placeholders unless we want to do times right now. But Elena could work with us to firm up times on that.
I would prefer the 19th being in the afternoon if possible, and then the 12th being in the morning. If we're doing morning and afternoon. But
Yeah.
we can
yeah.
finalize that via email. Okay, and then we would also need to make the request to the county commission by their June 8th agenda that they have a placeholder for us. Their meeting will be at 9 a.m. on the 20th, so we'll have to make sure we get our information to them in plenty of time of what our official request is. Vice Chair.
Thank you. And here's the thing, you know, it's easy to sit here and feel stunned over all of this, but it's really no surprise whatsoever. We've been working towards this and waiting for the results of the impact fee study that came quite a few months later than what we were hoping. So now here we are, and we have 6 action steps to take. I do have quite a few other, you know, questions in terms of the buildings and that type of thing, but as far as knowing that we need schools, as far as knowing that we only want to rezone our kids once, as far as knowing that we have waited a very long time. Now it's time, you know? And I would like to think that because the impact fees were suspended for so long, when this community was really in the tank, hopefully that helped reignite a new beginning for this community. And we certainly are seeing that. There's a lot of people that want to be in Marion County. And that's a great problem to have in a lot of ways. And it's a testament to our area. But now it's time to take the steps. I wouldn't even call them bold steps, the needed steps to accommodate the people that and the children that are coming in. And I love how you kept sharing, Ms. Dobbins, reassess, reassess, reassess. I don't know that anyone's crystal ball these days is clear enough to project, 10, let alone 15 years into the future. But from my perspective, I feel very confident of what we need now. And as far as the schools and wings that we're talking about building, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, and Board Member Cummings, you brought this up. Are they going to be hardened for school safety from the start, so we're not having to go back and try to do that? We're talking a lot of money here, and I just want to make sure that the money that we're spending is going to build buildings that are the most effective and safe for what we're trying to do. And also as well, we do a tremendous service to the community for all of the hurricane and sheltering that we do. There are other counties that have standalone, emergency shelters that we visited. But if we're going to do this again, I'm always interested in being the best community partner that we can be as a school board. And are these prices also factoring in the ability to make sure that they will function well as shelters? Because people come here when the hurricanes come.
Yes, in fact, we're having shelter training today over at the EOC. So, yes, indeed, for example, the 42.5 for the 2 elementary school would not only include sheltering, but it also include the school hardening cost. Again, I just want to say that that's prices as of today. If we had a world event or something like that, that could change. So we did include those in the estimate as presented today.
Great, thank you.
Vice Chair, if you wouldn't mind, thank you, Ms. Dobbins. I would like to ask the county administrator, thank you for being in attendance today, to come up and assist us with our timeline to ensure that we are meeting the county's timeline as well. Welcome.
Good morning, and nice being here with you today. Regarding the June 20th BCC meeting, I would like to know exactly what you would be asking the board for, the Board of County Commissioners. We publish our agenda on June 14 for the June 20th meeting, and we would like that package to be complete and ready for board's consideration based on what you will be asking for.
Thank you. So what we learned yesterday, and we have yet to make consensus on the impact fee recommendation, so we do have to have that conversation at this point. But according to the Florida statute that Attorney Powers was expressing, we would be asking for extraordinary circumstances to raise our impact fees, potentially, if this board does consensus, to raise our impact fees, to first of all reinstate the impact fee, and secondarily to raise it to what the new impact fee study says. Since we have had them suspended for 17 years, the new study does recommend about $7,000 more than what the impact fee was when it was suspended. And according to statute, there are extraordinary circumstances that we do meet the criteria for to ask for that increase. And so that part of that is that we have to hold 2 public workshops to have additional conversation to ensure that we are meeting that extraordinary circumstances situation, and then that does go before the county. So if this board agrees today that we do want to move forward with the recommendations of the consultant yesterday as to the impact fee amounts, then that would be what we would be publishing as our public workshop conversation, and then that would be the same request unless we modify it based on the public workshops. But
So you will have a complete ordinance to be considered by the board at that time, and we have a advertisement requirement that we will have to meet before the board can take action on that. Now, another option would be if you want to present your whole package to the board to be accepted on the 20th, and then schedule the hearing for another day for the board to be able to take action. Our next meeting, regular board meeting, which could be combined with a public hearing, would be the July 18.
yes.
So those are the dates.
Thank you. Ms. Straub was here yesterday, and she expressed
She shared
that.
that? Okay.
Yes, so I had that date written down as a secondary date, that July 18th. We do understand that if and when the county commission does approve the recommendation, then the 90-day window begins also for the fee to go into place. So I think part of it is this is a hurry up and wait scenario, and somewhat that we've been waiting on this information, and now we're trying to figure out when we're bringing it to you.
And thank you for asking, and the 90-day will kick off as you approve the ordinance. We will have 90 days before we can implement.
Right.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you. So with that being said, board, I am interested again, if it's possible for us to actually move our timeline a little tighter. I know that there may only be 4 of us present for a June 7th meeting, but if we were able to put something together then, or I think it would be helpful for the county to have the information that we're requesting for. We could put it on our June 13th already scheduled board meeting as well. I know it's not 7 days, but it is 6 days different. And I'm just trying to make sure that we're meeting all the timelines. I understand that we may not have all 4 of us, but we can get business done, or excuse me, all 5 of us, but we can get business done with just 3 of us here. So I'm trying to.
Especially if we have consensus.
Right, especially if we have consensus today, and we know what we're doing as a public workshop is essentially to hear from the public, but we've already come to consensus on what it is that we might be asking for.
I'm comfortable with the 7th and the 13th. Reverend Cummings, what time is your first meeting on the 7th?
If we need to move forward, let's just go ahead and move forward. I think you know where I am. I think all of you know where I am with this, so I'm fine with that.
Okay. So then we're looking at the 7th, and then a public hearing as well as a board meeting on the 13th, or not a public hearing, a public workshop before, like in the morning, or?
Madam Chair, if we, yes, Ms.
If we are planning to do a workshop on the 7th, that ad would have had to already been placed today. And I can tell you Ocala Star-Banner does not run as they used to. It would probably take them 3 days before they acknowledge and actually do the ad for the 7th.
Yeah, and it's not a public hearing, it's a workshop. So.
Correct, but it would be short of the 7 days in order to give the public time to notify them that we are doing this. Also, please take into consideration that we must ask whether or not this auditorium is available, which I have just sent an email to Ms. Larson to make sure that this auditorium is available on the dates that you're requesting. I initially asked her for the 7th and the 13th, or the 13th and the, so I'm waiting for a response from her to see if it's even available, make sure there's nothing that, so.
Attorney Powers, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, we need to provide that. We need to provide that notice. Notice can be provided via our website. I've been an advocate for quite some time of us finding ways to make sure that we are able to have expedient when we need an advertisement. That it's not something that takes several days to get, or a couple of days to get in public, into the paper. And there are some potential solutions for that, but none that can help with this situation right now.
Yeah.
If we began with advertising on our website for the 31st, today on our website, and then publish it in the paper tomorrow, that 6 days would be considered reasonable notice. So the courts have long upheld, and the Attorney General's opinions have upheld that if there's that the problem does not occur when there is a 6 day as opposed to 7 day notice. The problem occurs when there's something that does not give the public a reasonable notice. So the reasonable notice would be we place it on our website, we advertise it by all means possible, and then we initiate the advertisement as soon as possible. That's presuming that with our current state of affairs and our current advertiser, that we're going to be able to get something published in the paper by tomorrow, if that were able to happen.
And again, this is requiring 2 public workshops. So it's not just that we're having one public conversation, but we would be having 2 separate workshops specifically on this one item with no other agenda.
And the fact is, again, with part of the whole, it's a totality of circumstances test with the reasonable notice. The fact that there are 2 that are on the same identical topic, if anyone were to, feel that they didn't get adequate notice as to the first, the second is 7 days later, so.
Vice Chair?
So it sounds like you're comfortable and we're well within.
I'm comfortable, but I think it needs to go on our website today, and it needs to then use all avenues that we have for advertising immediately to get it there for tomorrow. And then I'll be most likely making some recommendations to the superintendent and board as to what we do for the future for making sure these things.
I welcome that conversation because we know our local paper has been struggling and, we need to do what we need to do. There also, too, I was reminded yesterday that about the updated student generation rate and getting that in writing to the county as well. I believe that was requested by Ms. Straub.
Yes, and that was something that was going to be coming directly from Mr. Hurley, that he, as those requests come forth, I believe he had the directive yesterday that we offered to him to move forward with the new student generation number as conversations with staff begin between the city and the county and so forth. So, board, before we move on to any additional conversation on this, I want to ensure that we are talking about a consensus on the recommendation at 100%. So this is what we have to have this conversation. If you'll go back to yesterday's slides, at 100% request for impact fees. And that single-family number was $10,693. The multifamily amount is $9,728, and the mobile home park fee is $7,166. That was the recommendation from Banesh, slide 90 of yesterday's presentation that is noted as findings of the technical study calculated school impact fee schedule. Do we have consensus with that being what our conversations will be on the 7th and the 13th?
Yes.
With the extraordinary.
Yes, with the extraordinary circumstances, because they would be, the increase is significant from what they were 17 years ago. And so we have consensus to move
Yes.
forward with that? Agreed. Okay. For the record, wanted to make sure we knew what we were talking about, so that's what will be published on our website today. We will hold a meeting the morning of the 7th and another workshop the morning of the 7th and a workshop prior to our 13th board meeting, and requesting the county hold a placeholder with this information in it after the public workshops that we will be holding. We'll approve that or potentially on the 13th as our board meeting, and then have that before the county for their 20th.
Madam Chair,
Meeting.
let me correction.
Yes, sir.
Just for clarity. So we're going to do the one workshop on June 7th, Wednesday, June 7th, correct?
Are we looking at in the morning?
In the morning.
Morning, and then
If
that's the
space
one.
is available.
If the space is available, correct. And then that would be the first public workshop.
Yes.
Second public workshop will be June 12th, Monday.
No.
I think June 13th.
June 13th.
Before our board meeting.
Okay,
Before our regularly scheduled.
okay. Okay.
Attorney Powers.
And I just want to touch on something that our county administrator just had mentioned, because it's important that we have our team work with them for clarity as to what it is that's being requested. Specifically, we can look at what the study has recommended and make some decisions as to what we're going to recommend for an increase in the impact fee ordinance. But under the statute I cited earlier, 163.31801.6G, specifically one of those items there, well, of the three items, one is requiring the study, which has been completed. The second is the publicly noticed workshops. The third is the impact fee increase ordinance is approved by at least a 2/3 vote of the governing body. So we here make the recommendation based on our study and say, here's our study, here's why why this amount is being requested. It's because of this study. I can't put a burden on them, that's the county, to say that they need to have all their ducks in the row to adopt an impact fee ordinance on that day. You know, that is something that them and their attorney may need to, consult with me and the team so that we can try to make that work, but I don't want to create artificial timelines for them that I'm not authorized to do. So if that impact fee increase ordinance is approved by a 2/3 vote of that governing body, that's fine, but there's going to be some stuff that has to happen. It's not just a matter of us handing over a number and then they have a lot of legwork to do. So we'll need to be able to coordinate with them well, and I think we have in the past, and I want to make sure that we're able to do that.
I do have a question, though. We just heard from the county that stated that they need the information by the 14th.
Mm-hmm.
Are we kind of tightening them up by waiting until the 13th? We were just talking about the 12th and the 19th, so why couldn't we do the 12th?
Well, fortunately, if that was directed toward a board member, I didn't mean to interrupt. Okay. Fortunately, what I see is that we have the study. I believe that study's already been provided, but if not, it will be soon. It's certainly public record. Then as to the recommendation, our recommendation is likely going to track the study, but it's among one of those three, one of those proposals that were listed within the study. That is what we have to do here, is essentially come up with what that number is, and it's based on and included in the research study. So there may be other considerations that they have to take into account for that. But as far as our part is simply really a matter of turning over the study and making our recommendation as a board to them. There's more that's involved on their end.
Dr. James.
Ms. Dobbins or Dr. Gullett, do you feel like your department can put forth a complete packet by the time we meet on the 7th to indicate exactly what we're looking for with the impact fee?
Yes, ma'am. So the slide that summarized all the projects would be that recommendation, and we would just add the timelines into that. So me and Boston Ellis just had that discussion, so we would be prepared for that.
Okay, so we are more than comfortable with preparing an appropriate packet to be up for public discussion on the 7th, and then again on 12th or 13th, whatever we land on, and then we would take that presumably voted on packet to the county by the 14th for their board meeting on the 20th.
So our part of the ordinance would be to provide the plan. The ordinance submittal would fall on the attorney, is my understanding.
Right.
In other words, we don't write, the district's not writing the ordinance. The attorney writes the ordinance in conjunction with the Board of County Commissioners attorney. That is my understanding.
So then, Attorney Powers, do you feel comfortable with?
That depends on Mr. Mentor's schedule and being able to work with them. I've certainly never had a problem with that in the past, but again, I don't like hemming up other people's timelines either, so.
And that's why I keep going back to the 12th, to give you that little flexibility in there, because you're going to need that. Because they need theirs on the 14th, from what I'm hearing.
Welcome back.
Good morning again. I just want to alert the board that whenever we come up with the ordinance, we have to advertise it for 10 days before it's considered for action.
And that was shared with us by Ms. Straub yesterday.
Which is why the 8th was the day.
Yes, she did share us with June 8th.
The 8th was the day that she provided to us, which would have been the 10 days, I believe.
Right, which requires that the ordinance be drafted by myself and Mr. Mentor prior to, or immediately after our first meeting and prior to the second meeting regarding extraordinary circumstances. And would have to be, we would essentially now have
Well, it would need to be
5
done.
days to get that done from today.
And part of the reason we had conversation yesterday about expediting this in the month of June is we understand the county commission's about to have a change, and so we wanted to try to not impact that change that the commission was going to have. So going from 5 commissioners to 4 commissioners and try to get it all in the month of June. So with all of that being said, though, if we have to have what is approved by the board in a board meeting to the county as the official ordinance that they are then publishing for 10 days, we're not going to make a June date.
No, but I don't necessarily believe that it's required either. And what I mean by that is, I believe that provided his schedule allows, Mr. Mentor and I we can get most language together in a very brief time and make changes to the core language as needed. Again, and I don't know his schedule, and I hate to drop a large project on him without being able to know what our timelines are exactly. But yes, I'm willing to do that, and I think that I can reach out to him and try to get some clarity as to what both of us need to do on that.
So would it be your understanding, Attorney Powers, that apart from us actually having an official vote at a board meeting, we could still submit to the county an ordinance that we want? That's where my question is, because if we have to meet a June 8th deadline for an official ordinance publication for the county to submit with their 10-day window, if we have to approve that in official board meeting, we're not going to make that date.
Right, and what it shows is that, again, under G2, the local government jurisdiction has held not less than 2 publicly noticed workshops, and then the impact fee increase ordinance is approved by at least 2/3 vote of the governing body, which in this case, for governing body would mean county commission. So consensus is fine for us to move forward because we're not taking action except to pass along the information. So that's a board meeting or some meeting at which we gather consensus. And by consensus, though, I mean consensus. Everybody agrees to go with this plan, even if it's not the one necessarily be perfect and what they want. because otherwise it's not a 4-1, but if one person is vehemently opposed, you don't have consensus. So,
Vice Chair.
Thank you. Here's what I propose. How about we do our part, we get the ball rolling in good faith, we do the best we can to work together to make this happen, and because we can talk ourselves out of anything, and we can extend a deadline for infinite amount of time. But the fact of the matter is that the longer we do that, we roll into July, people go on vacation, we roll into budget time. There's always going to be great reasons to not do things. But there's every good reason, and I think that's been provided to us to move forward with this and hopefully make it a priority with our partners without creating, undue burden on anyone. Let's just work together in good faith, and hopefully that'll land us where we need to be.
I agree. And if I'm being overly cautious with my comments, it's simply that
We need to hear
we've
that.
worked quite closely with the county and the municipalities in order to try to get to some agreements.
Yep.
That got us working together, and I think it's been positive. And that's something that we want to make sure that we're not stepping on toes along
We
the way.
want that to continue.
Yes. Thank you, Attorney Powers, and thank you, Board. Dr. Gullett, you're leaning forward.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just some point of information, June 7th, 12th, 13th, there's availability in this room all day as you're talking about times. Thank you.
Thank you.
Check.
Yes. So we will determine if we want to do the 12th or the 13th. Can we do that via email and coordinate that, or do we want to do that right now?
So the question is, do we want to have that meeting on the 12th or the 13th?
I think Ms. Martinez Lopez had something to share.
I just need times for these meetings.
Yes.
In order to publish them, she's got to have it.
I need to have times. So if we're doing the one in the morning on the 7th at 9, but I know you guys discussed the one for in the afternoon before the board meeting on the 13th, what are we looking at? We're looking at 3, 2:30?
Yeah.
Just
Let's
need-
start with the 7th and times.
Yes, 7th. Do you want to do 8 a.m. since we do have to get to Tampa, or do you want to do 9 a.m. on the 7th?
8's fine with me.
Whichever.
For the 7th.
Why don't we do 9, because if we need, do we need staff? I'm just thinking about people get here and
They
get
start
here.
working at 7.
Oh, that's right, we're on the
It's a
summer
summer
schedule. Okay, so is 8 fine?
Can we do
Okay.
8 a.m. on
8
the
a.m.
7th?
Yep.
Okay, 8 a.m. on the 7th.
All right,
And then on.
12th?
Do we want to do the 12th? I'm fine with the 12th if you guys.
Well, an extra day is an extra 24 hours. And we're trying to move this.
Okay, and so we want to do the afternoon?
Let's do it in the morning.
I think the intention was to have a morning session and an evening session so that, because it is for public comment, if someone couldn't come
I think come.
in the morning on the 7th, they would be available in the evening on the
Okay.
next.
So which of those would you like to be in the evening if that's what?
Why don't we
The
do the
12th
evening
would
on the
have to-
7th and the
We
morning?
can't do the evening on the 7th, we're at
Oh, that's right.
So the 12th will be on the evening.
In the evening.
Okay.
What time?
5:30, right?
Can we make it anytime, or does it have to be 5:30?
It can be made anytime.
Anytime.
It's public.
Although people working and stuff, if they want to come, I think sticking with
5:30.
5:30, our usual time.
I can't,
I
it's
think
not
the
gonna be.
consistency is good.
Yeah. 5:30?
This will be listed as a special work session?
Yes.
On the 12th, yes.
Both of them.
Yes, because they're both addressing extraordinary circumstances.
Attorney Powers, is that sufficient for notice?
Yes. I note that we already have a board meeting on the 13th. I guess what you're saying is the 24 hours we want to get it the day before. That way we have all day the 13th to work on implementing that. So we'll have both the 12th and 13th, we'll have 5:30 meetings.
Yes.
One a special work session, one a board meeting.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And this just reminded me of something that I would have liked to have asked Banesh. I know we have lots more to talk about, but something that I would have liked to ask Banesh, so if you all just want to make a note of reaching out to them and asking the question of them, I am interested in knowing of the charts that we saw yesterday of those that, the school districts that do not have 100% adoption on their impact fee, if they recommended 100% adoption and their county commission adjusted that amount. I'm just interested in knowing if the school board adjusted the amount based on the recommendation, or if that was an adjustment that happened in the county, just for curiosity's sake, frankly, because a lot of them are at 100%, but some are at 67 or 77 or 92, and I'm interested in knowing where that adjustment occurred. So if you can just ask Banesh and you can get that to us at our next workshop, that'd be great. Okay, so I think we cleared that up. We know what we're doing with that recommendation. Now we have lots more to talk about, board. Who wants to go next?
I'll go.
Dr. James.
I just went in order by slide, so most of my questions are for Ms. Dobbins or her department, although I have, they're probably all for Ms. Dobbins. So starting at slide 6, I just want to go on record to note, it was mentioned that we would not want to impact any school twice, but we will be impacting Mo's twice because we just rezoned Mo's. So I just think it's important for that point of clarification. The elementary plan would require another rezoning of Mo's.
So correct. We would potentially have impact to some students twice. What we want to definitely avoid is 3 impact to those students.
Yes, I understand that. I just wanted to clarify that point, just
Thank
so
you
it didn't
for
look like we were overlooking the fact that we had just done that.
Yes, ma'am.
Marion Oaks. On slide 19, sorry, I'm getting there. I want to make sure I understand my own notes. How many portables would be left at these 2 elementary schools once the wings were built? Is the intention that these wings would cover portables?
Because these are on the 10-year mark, that's going to be a variable. Our goal is to eliminate portables, but based on projections and reassessment, there is the potential to have portables remaining. So really, this far out would not be able to give you a solid answer on that.
And then the question following, would I presume have the same answer then for slide 24 with regards to Denellen and Bellevue High? And I in part ask because as I visualize these campuses, in my brain, where the next wing at Bellevue High would go is where the portables currently live. Right. So that's in part the reason I'm asking the question, because if the portables have to go somewhere, then how do all those pieces? So I'm just kind of, I guess, bringing awareness to that. My next point is probably going to be the one with the most contention. So slide 35, we're talking about our unfunded school projects, one of which includes Ocala Springs, which, can someone provide clarification? I believe that Ocala Springs has 16 portables currently. Is that correct?
No, that is not correct. They might have 16 portables, but instructional classrooms, I believe, are currently 6 or 8.
Okay. So these current unfunded school projects, which are on our 5-year unfunded plan, is that correct?
Yes,
okay.
That is correct.
Total out to be $100 million. But I want to note that the intention of completing these is not to begin until the end of the first 5 years.
Correct, because we feel like we can manage them through portable usage at this time.
Okay, so my, and I'm going to skip over kind of to the end and then I'll come back. My personal preference, I guess would be the best way to put it. If you look at slide 49, we're looking at the top there. It says District 5-year capital needs. I believe that this is misleading because in the unfunded maintenance and facility projects, it lists $633 million. That includes, if you go back to slide 45, that includes both the 23 to 28 number as well as the 29 to 38 number. Is that accurate? At the bottom of slide 45, there's $297 million for unfunded 23 to 28, and then there's 336 estimated unfunded for 29 to 38. Those two numbers together come to that 633 number that's at the top of slide 49, I believe.
Will you please repeat the question?
Sure. So at the top of slide 49, the table at the top says District 5-year capital needs, which would presumably mean that the things under that table are for the next 5 years. The first line item is unfunded maintenance and facility projects totaling $633 million. If I'm reading this slide and this table correctly, that would mean that we have $633 million in unfunded maintenance and facility projects for the next 5 years.
That's for 15 years.
You see why I would be confused, though?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The top part is misleading. What we were trying to do is sum up the total needs based on slide 45.
Understood. So where I'm at is the cost for those, so it says additional new capacity 28 to 38 is part of the growth. Is that correct? That's new capacity. So that 271 million is addressing growth. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So what I'm looking for is, where is that 100 million unfunded for Ocala Springs, from slide 35, where we have those, I think, 6 or 7 school sites listed, where we would address the unfunded.
Well, this is your total.
Right. Right. So I believe in looking at the slide on 49, the unfunded maintenance and facility projects of 633 would involve those new construction capacity wings listed for the Bellevue Middle, Harborview, Ocala, Ward Highlands, and Maplewood. And then the new capacity is the high-density growth at the top of the chart on page 45.
Okay. Say that one more time.
So the chart on page 49, the unfunded maintenance and facility projects of 633 million would be the 5-year plan and projections, and also the new construction of low density. And then the additional new capacity would be that of the new 5-year plan for new construction based on high-density capacity. So when you total everything, it comes up to just over the $1.1 billion.
So what I'm looking at is, how I looked at this was, if we're looking at our two options here on this slide 49, we have a 1.2 billion and a 1 billion, which is the difference of essentially $200 million. My understanding is we're looking at about $200 million for that Ocala Springs, Bellevue Middle, all of those. Is that correct?
If I may clarify, I think when I initially had looked at slide 45, it said District 5-year facility work plan. So I had taken the sum of the 297, which I see is 23 to 28, and the sum from 29 to 38 of that 336 million. So that totals at 663. So my apologies for that. So if we're looking at just for the 5-year, it says 5-year work plan, but the unfunded for 5 years in 2023 to 2028, it should be that 297. So it would reduce specifically the 5 years by 336 million, but that would total out to the 1.13 billion, just shifting those 5-year projects based on that.
Understood. So what I am looking to see is a priority given in these next 5 years to Bellevue Middle, Harborview, Ocala Springs, Ward Highlands, Maple Woods, and the Lake Weir Middle replacement. That's what I'm looking to see, make a priority of. We have students in portables, and maybe it's, maybe it's not a 16 classroom wing, maybe it's an 18 or an 8 classroom wing, I don't know. But I would like to see a priority for this presumably $100 million for the low density growth and the replacement of Lake Weir Middle included in the first 5 years. I don't think that I am comfortable with students who have presumably been in portables for, can someone say how long students have been in portables at Harborview and Ocala Springs and Ward Highlands and Maplewood and Bellevue Middle? Does anyone know that number? How long they've already been using portables?
They've been using portables for years. If I could point out that placing an abundant amount of new construction within the first 5 years is taxing on our community workforce of finding small business construction and large business construction to complete all the construction we would then be asking. That's the reason why we also spread out the building of the new high school not to be in year 25, 26 like we did the elementary schools, because we have concerns on the standpoint of even finding enough construction workers to build. So we, in my professional opinion, add all of these wings to that existing construction that's already being done with the 2 elementary schools, the 2 wings, and then the new high school, and then the 2 wings at the middle school. We may not have enough construction workers within our area or region to complete those jobs. That's my only concern with that.
And so I would respectfully disagree. So what I would offer is, Mr. Knight has been through, we've had the discussion publicly about our timeline for people to be added to our contractor list. We've had that conversation a couple times. I would ask that we kind of refresh that conversation. I think that we have people, including myself, who grew up in Orange County. It's possible. There is absolutely the possibility to make it happen. And so unless we have a no and we have data to show why it's completely impossible, I would like to see us go out into market and try to find the contractors to make it happen. Because if we're going to use contractors to redo an office for the district office, I want to see us also prioritize building the wings. So that's where I'm at with this entire conversation. And so have we reached out to contractors in neighboring counties and asked them if they would like to be a part of this bidding process?
So we advertise for our contractors in multiple arenas, so they have opportunities to become contractors. We do have, in this past year, increased our pool significantly by that outreach, and we come up again annually on that re-notification for them to apply as contractors.
And when is that date again? The annual date?
The annual date comes up here in June and July.
Okay. So presumably, a new contractor could apply to be added to our pool that currently does work in Orange County or Seminole County or Lake County or any other county, right?
Correct. My concern is not attracting general contractors. It's the subcontractors that they hire that tend to be within the pools of our own region, which would be depleted by competition of so many contractors doing all of the construction. That would be my professional concern.
I can appreciate that. I also think there are contractors who put people in apartments and bring them from out of town. And there's a lot of ways to solve this problem. So until we've worked through that, I'm not comfortable saying that it's not a possibility, personally. So from this board member seat, what I want to see is this stuff that we're pushing to not begin until after the first 5 years. I want to see it prioritized. So those Bellevue Middle, Harborview, Ocala Springs, Ward Highlands, Maplewood, and the Lake Weir Middle School, I want to see that take a priority in the first 5 years. And if it's not possible, if the workforce is not there, then let's see the evidence for that. Because right now, the theology behind it is not enough fact for me to to feel confident in that decision. I would like to ask, why can we not, on slide 38, I would like to see us go ahead and list that and then ask for a leaseback option for the telecommunications piece until we are able to complete that new telecommunications space next to the new warehouse. Is that a possibility?
Yes, that is a possibility if agreed upon.
Okay, so this board member would like to see us go ahead and get that listed on the same aggressive timeline with the warehouse, with a leaseback option for the back half of that parcel to continue to lease back until we're able to complete a new telecommunications space. I want to make a note here. Currently, we're looking at about $250 a square foot for professional space when purchased, as well as built, including land, which would put the district office, if $14 million is the price point, at a market value of 11.7. So we would be over-investing in a parcel that presumably would not return its value. So from a businesswoman's perspective, I would not buy a building. Now, of course, we may not buy it for $4 million. We may buy it for $2 million, and this could be a moot point. But if it's bought for $4 million and then $10 million is put into it, we're going to be over-invested into a parcel that cannot return its value. As well as, we could build new for somewhere between 250 and 400 a square foot. Brand new, exactly what we need. So those are just areas of caution that I really want to make the board aware of. I can understand the intention there, but I think that it needs to be at least made aware part of the conversation. I didn't see MTI being for sale in any of the slides, so where are we with that?
So MTI is currently being used for academic programming, and that would remain until those programs shift.
Okay, how many classrooms will MTI need for the new academy, alternative academy, whatever, we don't have a name yet. But Dr. Gullett, do you know how many classrooms we're going to need for that alternative program housed at MTI?
Dr. James, I do not know exactly how many. We're looking at our current numbers right now. I would anticipate, I think, Ms. Dobbins, I know we need a whole wing.
Yes, my understanding is Building 4 on this site would be utilized for that, separating out district staff from that building.
And how many classrooms are in Building 4?
I do not know off the top of my head.
Okay. So this is a big old place for 100 students. If we move off, if we do district office and we move district office out and we have then now redistributed everything, and we have this whole property where we are using, and I will say, I really think this is the best place we have currently to hold our board meetings, but then to just house, I think the number from Dr. Livingwood was south of 100 students for next year. I'm not sure that's incredibly responsible when we have, is it ideal to put them at Reddick Collier Elementary? Absolutely not. But we also have space throughout the district. So I think we need to at least have an honest conversation about what other space would be available throughout the district. I know that we said that there are, on slide 46, we talk about, and you did note, Ms. Dobbins, you did note that there's an asterisk down there to indicate impact fees. So my question is this: when I look at these assets and I look at this map, what is left? Is everything left purchased with impact fees, or are there other things left other than that?
There are some small properties that are left that have long-term leases on them that we would not be able to readily sell. So for example, in Denellen, we have some parcel out in that location that currently has the Boys Club. The Boys Club used their funds to build the current building on that land, and that land has a long-term lease. Also out in part of Reddick, we have long-term leases in regards to the library in Reddick and also another portion of that building.
So what the note here indicates is that we can't sell, but we could swap. correct?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Herlihy on that question.
Parcels purchased with impact fee money could be swapped.
Good morning. Yes, we've done a land swap recently. Specific example, and the one time that we did it was for property that the board owned up at WEC, and then that was swapped and became now the Winding Oaks school site that we're talking about, 20 acres on Southwest 49th Avenue. So can be done. That just takes us in-kind to in-kind or an in-kind swap without having any money liquid.
Understood. So where are the asterisk properties?
The asterisk.
So the asterisk down here indicates that there is.
Yes, largely they are the sites, and I say largely, I think it may be completely the sites that have been identified for future schools. So we'd be talking about the 3-4 sites in Marion Oaks, the site for the middle school in Silver Spring Shores. So that brings us to about 5.
So that's the origination of my question is when we look at this map and we look at slide 47, is there anything left? And you did just mention the Reddick property and the other, but outside of those two properties that have leases, is there anything left?
So Ms. Dobbins is reminding me of there's 16 acres adjacent to the north of Vanguard High School. Yeah, and that was with impact fees as well.
Okay.
So when they're purchased like that, that was with the understanding that it's used for growth necessitated capacity.
Understood. So everything purchased with impact fees, I want to ensure I understand this, because I think that there's been some confusion in the community, so that's really why I'm trying to ensure that everyone understands this. Everything on this map we currently own, and most of it was purchased with impact fee money, and we will then utilize it to build schools in the next 15 years, as this plan indicates. Then what is on slide 47 are some assets that we could presumably sell, of course, presuming we follow through with the plan as presented to vacate the said properties. The only thing left outside of both of these things would then be the Vanguard High School property and a few lease properties, including the one you mentioned just a few minutes ago.
That sounds right.
Okay. I'm just trying to make sure that we're clear about that, because there's this misnomer potentially in the community that there's all of these properties just floating around that we're not utilizing, we're not selling, and we're not using in the future. And so I want to try and clarify that, because if we're going to use them in the next 15 years for a school site, we certainly don't want to sell them or swap them, because we need them in the next 15 years, as the impact fee study and the long-range growth plan has indicated. So I just want to make sure we have a crystal clear picture of what's left on the table. That's really my intention. So thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
I'm almost done. Slide 48, the sales tax. I think that and math is not my strongest subject, but if I look at what was presented on slide 49, it looks as if the sales tax could go on the 28 ballot and we would still have if we got the impact fees, would have everything we need to start our plan. And in 28, we could get the sales tax and still be able to move forward with our plan as designed. Can someone who's better at math confirm that for me?
Okay, so the options on slide 49, you currently have your 1.5 mils, which you can utilize to issue for certificates of participation to bond. That would bring those revenues in today for the district. If the impact fees are passed, you can utilize impact fees as they're being collected, because you wouldn't have enough on day one to pay cash. to pay the debt service on those certificates of participation. I would like to note, though, that if you're using another source of revenues that's coming in, the capacity still with your 1.5 mils could be affected. The reason you can't borrow against impact fees is they can fluctuate greatly year to year, but you can utilize those as a source of revenues against your certificates of participation. So when you're looking at the ability to bond, you're really looking at what your capital outlay millage is providing you today. So with the sales tax coming in, even if the voters approved that in November of 2024, you really wouldn't be issuing until May of 2025 or June, because you would need those collections to start coming in before you'd be able to even pay debt service on that. So there is that bit of a lag as collections come in with the sales tax. Did that address your question?
Not quite. So what I'm looking to ask is, I think it's important that we show we can be good stewards of our money. And one may draw awareness to potentially the school board winding up in this pickle, and we're all kind of wondering how we got here, right? And so I think there is a portion of our community that would like to see us be good stewards of money that we are going to take on loan or whatever, and show that we're going to be fiscally responsible and manage our issues, and then ask for more. And so I'm asking, can we afford, with this plan as presented and the timeline presented, afford to do the sales tax in '28 instead of '24? And would we have enough money to cover what we're looking to accomplish in the first 5 years?
So based on the projections so are you looking at the 297 million and the 208 in new capacity that you would want to accomplish in 5 years? From slide 45, I'm seeing 297 in the 5-year work plan, and then the new capacity being built in 5 years, I believe, is the 208.2 million.
So we have 297 in unfunded 5-year plan for the first 5 years. We have another 100 million in low density growth and replacement for Lake Weir Middle School. So that puts us at 397. And then we have what was in the plan to address the overcrowding for the first 5 years, what is that number? Because
so that's a 208.2.
So we're looking at 600-ish?
Okay, so if you're looking at just your 1.5 mils, the most we would recommend on a 20-year issuance, you would get 300 million today. As impact fees come in, because that's a source that you're collecting over time, those would accumulate. You're not going to get, the 500,000 in impact fees today.
Mm-hmm.
So short answer is no. You can do 300 million of projects today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's if you're leveraging the 1.5 mils out for 20 years.
Understood. But some of these schools we wouldn't be breaking ground on for 2 or 3 years. So how much of that impact fee would we see in the next 3 years?
That I'm not sure. I wasn't involved with the study. You would have to ask the people who provided the impact fee study.
Okay.
Not sure how quickly they were assuming those collections would come in.
Well, I'm confused because I think you just said we wouldn't see this 525 immediately. So when would we see it?
My understanding is as developers are building the new communities, that's when you're receiving those impact fees that come in. So I think that's why we don't use those as a source of revenues, because that can fluctuate greatly year to year. You could all of a sudden have, 1,000 new homes being built that you would receive impact fees on, or you could have 25.
So okay. I'm trying to figure out how to articulate this in a way that I'm conveying my message correctly. Sure, go ahead and give it a shot.
this is just a sort of a side issue to what you're talking about too. The impact fees can only be used for the benefit of that local particular area.
Absolutely, but the 300 million presumably could be used for Ocala Springs, Maplewood, other things.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean local particular area. I meant for specifically the
to address growth. Yes.
As a result of the new people moving in.
Yes. So what I'm trying to understand is we have about 600 million in the first 5 years. If we did everything that we quote unquote wanted to do, the 5 years of deferred maintenance, addressing the low growth, overcrowding, and addressing what the Benesh has presented to us. If we have 300 million in the 20-year structure, how much would be a safe estimate that we're going to get from the impact fees, or can we not make that assertion at all?
The only assumption we could use is based on what Benesh said yesterday.
And what is that number?
For impact fees, it's the I have my glasses on here.
525.
Right, or
Over how many years?
15 years.
Okay.
I think, if I may, you're asking how much could we borrow? And how much could we borrow now, and what would that cover? And that would be if we go on what what Benesh said yesterday, it would be the 2 schools, and I believe 2 wings. Building the 2 schools first at an estimated cost of $42.5. So those would be the things that we would have to start on doing before we get any sales tax, before we get any impact fees. We would have to, the only thing we could do up front is borrow money and, of course, sell some of our assets. So that's why I said in the beginning, this is a lot of moving parts, and even if we borrow the money, we have to be careful because the project has to be completed in 3 years before. So whatever we start, we've got to have it completed within the 3 years. But I think you're talking about that this piece right here.
So for IRS regulations, when you're borrowing funds, you have to have a reasonable expectation that you're going to spend 80% of those funds within 3-year period. So when we're looking at this, yes, you have your 5 years, but when we're issuing debt, we're saying, working with facilities and saying, what can you complete within that 3-year time frame? And then go out from there. So today, if you wanted to go out and borrow money, you could get 300 million over and pay that back over 20 years against your 1.5 mils, which take into consideration what Teresa had mentioned, those other funds that are being distributed for property insurance and your ongoing maintenance needs. So if you waited until 2028 for your sales tax collections in, you could do 300 million in projects today, use impact fees to do pay-go as they come in. So as those cash is collected, you need to save them to put them forth to the projects that you would need throughout the district. If you waited until 2028 for the school capital outlay for that half penny, then you would be able to issue more debt in 2029, so 6 years from now, to start building those additional projects in 2029 to do that influx of funding.
Can we put a sales tax on the midterm?
No. Legislation changed 1 to 2 years ago.
Can't do referendum either.
It has to be in.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And it can't be the primaries or anything like that. It has to be.
Okay, so this is the other piece to this puzzle that I'm really struggling with, is if we're gonna take out this initial loan for 300 million. I wish it was 300,000. And we're going to use that to immediately address what Benesh has put forward. Why is a district office in our plan?
So the 300 million would not cover any district offices to borrow against. You cannot borrow against the 1.5.
So my problem is, the plan as presented shows us purchasing a district office like next month. So can someone in the room address that? Because that is the biggest question I have. Why are we putting forth a plan that shows summer purchase of a district office if this 300 million we're borrowing cannot go to that? Like, am I the only person who sees this as a concern?
No, understand your concern and your question. So the 300 million borrowed would go toward new construction for schools. However, it allows us then to use capital outlay to purchase a district office, not borrowed money. The reason why we're presenting this opportunity now is because, one, we want to liquidate our assets of properties to be able to put toward the plan. And the other piece of the puzzle is that we have an opportunity now that was presented to us with purchasing a property that we feel that could suit our needs, that we want to take advantage of that opportunity now. So it's a combination of loan money being leveraged for new construction for schools, which then adjusts the capital outlay, which provides the opportunity for us to use up to $20 million that we would need, up to, hopefully it's less, for that data center and that new district office. Again, utilizing the district office in an opportunity that was recently presented to us.
How much is the presumed sum of the assets listed on slide 46?
Without appraisals, we do not know. And we don't have recent appraisals, which that is why on the next steps, you see listed for board action appraisal, so we could get that sum.
And Ms. Dobbins, just for clarification on the appraisal piece, the only way we would be able to even move forward with finding out appraisals or doing any kind of inspections or knowing any additional information is if this board moves forward with a letter of intent. Is that correct?
Correct. Without a letter of intent, which is non-binding, and the agreement to access, we don't know if we even want to move forward with purchasing the building. So those are the next steps. With the ultimate, if it is suitable, if it is going to be fitting to our needs, then we would come back to the board with the recommendation to purchase.
So I'm essentially done with all of my notes. This is what I'm going to say. I am not comfortable using capital outlay money to buy a district office unless we are planning to use capital outlay money to address the students in portables at Ocala Springs, Ward Highlands, any of the other schools. That's where I'm at. So it doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't fundamentally make sense to me. I can appreciate that it looks like a good purchase and all of those sentiments, and I also understand the domino effect and trickle effect of being able to offset other purchases. All of these assets listed here, we have to vacate to sell, I get it. But we could also sell and lease back with a future plan as well. So I'm not comfortable using capital outlay money, which would be used for students in facilities for the district office. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Dr. James. Which one of you wants to go next?
I'll start in.
Ms. Conrad.
So just kind of piggybacking on some things that Dr. James shared, I'll jump in with some of my questions. So if we were looking to build something for a district office, what is the estimate on that? Because I was under the assumption that the purchase of that property and the renovation was going to be a big savings at the point of our point cost.
Yes, so the last discussion we had a couple of years ago on building a new district office on our owned land was around $42 million. Now, that was a couple of years ago, so with price increases, it probably would guesstimate maybe around $45 million. So the purchasing up to $4 million with up to $10 million at $14 million would be a cost savings.
Right, because we're looking at $14.4 million. Okay, another piece of that puzzle is there was recently, and forgive me, I don't remember the name of the term, there was an evaluation done on this building, and it came up with 5 areas that are in extremely poor condition. So thinking forward, because in the past, I'll just give a disclaimer, I've been part of Marion County for 51 years. I've gone to school, I went to high school in this building, and there are a lot of struggles. So in thinking forward, as opportunities present themselves, this building is not going to last us forever. We're not looking at setting up shop here with our 100 students that are still here, and we've got some district staff here that we're using, but there are a pile of remodeling that we need to do here to bring it up to code. Every time we touch something, it has to be brought up to current code. It's been very expensive. So can you just share those 5 areas with us?
Yes, ma'am. So recently, we had a structural engineer conduct a structural study on this site. Mind you, it did not include electrical, it does not include plumbing, it's just simply structural. Of the buildings on this site, 5 buildings were listed in poor condition, which would require us to have significant work done on the structure to be able to continue to use those 5 buildings. Of those 5 buildings, 1 building is already condemned, which is Building 6, which has been condemned for years. However, I do want to state that the study does not eliminate the use of the buildings currently. What it highlights is that if we don't invest in the maintenance and the structural remediation that needs to occur on those buildings, they will no longer be able to be used in the near future. There were several other buildings, I think off the top of my head, it might have been 7 buildings that were listed in conditions that will need eventual structural repair, but just not as soon as the 5 listed in poor condition.
Because this area, it was one of them, correct?
The buildings were Building 3, which is currently where we house the main portion of our district office. It was Building 4, which is used by district and students at this time. It was this building that we're currently in. It was the gym, and it was also the condemned Building 6 that we've referenced.
I would be interested in what the cost would be, as we're looking at the $14.4 million in this other property, and what it would cost us to bring this building up to a status of good or excellent instead of poor. So we can compare what we're looking at putting into the structure here at MTI versus something else. So that's just something that I'd like to be able to weigh for pros and cons.
Yes, and that will be upcoming in the 5-year facility plan that we'll present later in the upcoming months. I can tell you that I believe it was around $6 million just for the structural repairs that are needed. That, again, does not include the electrical or the plumbing or other maintenance needs.
Okay. All right, my next question has to do with the timeline of funding and building schools. How long does it take typically to build? Let's start with the elementary schools.
I will bring Robert Knight up to answer that question, but I also want to state that we are exploring different ways to build schools and utilizing certain companies that can build them in a stated 14 to 18 month timeline. So by leveraging that avenue, it cuts through a lot of red tape that we're bound to. But if I misquote, I don't want to misquote, so I'll just have Robert talk to if we do it in-house ourselves by going through our contractors.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Knight. As we look at this timeline in 5 years, it seems like a long time, but when we look at getting all of these things improved and going through all of the steps and then finally break ground on a school, it seems like it's going to be tight and tricky. So I just wanted to be sure what we're looking at as far as the actual finality of finishing a school.
The average time frame for an elementary school will be about 2.5 years. Because even if you reuse a set of plans, you cut the design time down by as much as 2 to 3 months. But as you noted, Mrs. Conrad, that's exactly the case. You've got to survey the property. You've got to look at the infrastructure. Is it even there close to the site? If it's a site in the middle of nowhere, then we've got to partner with the county or city if they have a closer utility. If not, then you're looking at something like wells or treatment plants, which is an added step on top of the school design. So I would call it about 2.5 years to get an elementary school open once the green light is given.
Okay, and so as impact fees are collected, what is the timeline on those being used? Is there a limitation how long do we have to complete the project once the funds are collected?
You've got, the initial costs up front are going to be some of the ancillary costs like surveying the property, looking at the soils, looking at the drainage and the environmental impact. Are there anything, or are there any species we have to be aware of on a site that we're going to construct? That's really small in terms of dollars. The bigger cost up front would be hiring the architect, but you'd have to have the money in hand when the price is approved by the board for construction. So I would say you're looking at probably 10 to 12 months max before you'd be in position to have the money to fund construction. Although it's going to be billed in increments, we've got to write the purchase orders and the contract up front, and I believe the ruling, the requirements are that you have to have the money up front just to issue the purchase order. So you're looking at about 10 to 12 months for the bulk of the cost, which is probably 80% of the cost of a school, and the other 20% would be design fees and some of the ancillary costs up front.
If I could add to that, more specifically, impact fees usage would need to be done within 5 years.
That was my.
If we bond, then 80% of the project must be done within 3 years.
Okay, that's tight, isn't it?
Yes, which is why it needs to be spread out over time, in my opinion.
All right, thank you for that.
Ms. Dobbins, would you repeat what you just said? Because I was
So the
halfway
utilization of impact fees would need to be utilized within the 5 years of collection. So that's a rolling number. So if we were to collect fees today, we have 5 years to spend those, and then it moves on tomorrow. Well, in a year from now, it would be 5 years from that collection date. So it's a rolling 5 years. As far as if we bond, those certificates would need to be utilized with 80% of the project must be completed within 3 years.
Or what happens?
I'm sorry.
To clarify, the project doesn't need to be completed within 3 years. 80% of those funds, in accordance with the IRS regulations, need to be spent within 3 years. So when we start off, we work with facilities to say, how much do you reasonably expect to spend within 3 years? So as was mentioned, when you're starting off, you issue that purchase order. So those funds are out the door before the school is actually completed, which is why people will bond in advance. So to get those dollars to issue a purchase order to start the construction on a facility, you have to have those dollars in hand to issue. So even if they're being spent over time, so day one, if you're going to say $100 million is being spent over 12 years. The first part is the soft costs, such as your architectural, the engineering fees that go into this. Oftentimes when we do a bonding issue, we would come before the board for a reimbursement resolution. This does not obligate you at all to do any sort of bonding in the future. All it would allow you is to capture any costs before you actually issue, if you did so wish to do so, through the bond issuance. So we work closely with finance and facilities looking at this to say, when do you actually think you're really going to start spending those dollars before we would issue any debt? We would bring the reimbursement resolution plenty in advance, so as you're slowly spending dollars that the district is able to afford now, you could recoup those in a bond issuance if you wish to do so. And so then we do the actual debt issuance when you really think you're going to start spending a lot of money. So we look at this and say, your projects over the next 3 years that you think you're going to really start spending those dollars on, that's what we would look at in a bond issuance. So if you say to day one, we wouldn't go out and do $300 million today if we don't really think that within 3 years, $300 million of projects is going to be started. So we make sure to stagger it, that the district isn't borrowing too much before they actually need those funds in hand.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I had something else here. I'm having trouble finding it in my notes. Chair, if you want to go on, while I get myself together here.
Chair, I do have a question.
Go ahead.
I do have a question. I guess this is for Ms. Dobbins. I heard in your plans, this is one quick question. I heard in your plans about certain schools that, with the building of these new schools, that will alleviate some of the stress off of those schools. I didn't hear Saddlewood. Did you mention Saddlewood? Maybe I just didn't hear it.
Yes, sir. The second elementary school that was being built would relieve Saddlewood.
Okay.
It would open the same time as the first elementary school being built.
Thank you, because I know that we're experiencing a lot of growth
Yes, sir.
right across the street from there, so, okay. Thank you.
I'll go ahead and weigh in. A couple of questions that I have somewhat, and then just statements I want to make also. So based on the timeline that's been presented to us, that we would hope to have 2 elementary schools open in the 2025-2026 school year. And based on what Mr. Knight just told us, that it takes 2.5 years to build an elementary school, we're already behind what the projected timeline is. Is that my understanding?
Yes, but if you recall, I mentioned that we're exploring another avenue that could build within 14 to 18 months.
Okay. But the intention would be, based on this timeline, that we do need to make a decision rather quickly if we are intending to have 1 or 2 new elementary schools open in the next 2 school years.
We really need to come to our conclusion of recommendations on the next 5 years in the very near future, so we can begin those.
Okay.
We need to nail down the first 5 years.
No, and I understand that. It's kind of in tandem with the conversation that has already happened a bit. So I also understand the expense of the unfunded projects at some of our other schools where there has been growth, and I have the attendance counts up, and just for the record, our attendance counts, inclusive of charter schools and alternative schools, we did finish the school year 2,000 students more than what our projections were. So the last, what is this count? Whatever this day was that we got the count.
177.
Thank you. 178-day count was 45,462 students. That includes alternative schools and charter schools and all of that, but those alternative schools students are our students too that would have been in a middle school or high school. So we did finish at 45,462 students. So if that's any indicator, we're going to continue to see at least somewhat of a shift there in our continued enrollment. So while we are considering and having conversation about those additional wings in some of those unfunded projects currently, it's those projects, while removing portables from campuses that have been existing for many, many years, still does not actually address the issues we're experiencing where Sunrise is more than 1,000 students, and Hammett Bowen is approaching 1,000 students, and Saddlewood is approaching. All of the schools where this shift is going to significantly impact the overcrowding that we have. I also appreciate the thought that if and when we choose to build some of these projected elementary schools, that we rezone all of our elementary schools simultaneously, perhaps in that scenario, because Bellevue Santos is impacted, Bellevue Elementary is impacted. We have some other areas that shifting can begin to occur as we continue to look forward in this plan. I'm kind of just making comments more than questions. As far as moving forward with district office planning, the way I gather it, and this is for this board to have conversation about, is we do have to make a decision pretty soon if we want to move a technology center to the Phoenix Center property. Part of this plan, and even selling off any assets, is going to be imperative that we have plans for where people and our infrastructure is going to go. And so if we have any intent in the next 1 to 2 years to sell our downtown district office, even if we did a lease back option, how long are we leasing back? Because at some point, whomever chooses to purchase that property from us would have an intent to do something with it. And we certainly can't say we're leasing it for 5 to 10 years, because that is not getting us anywhere in the direction of what we're trying to go, because then all the money we just made off the sale, we're putting back in leasing. And so that's kind of defeating the purpose of what we're trying to do, to sell the asset. Completely understand listing the Central Warehouse property. That Central Warehouse is almost done. We'll be out of that one in September. So if we don't get that on the listed soon and appraised or whatever all needs to be done to start that process, I believe that's something we need to get started on tomorrow. This board member believes that. I, as an individual board member, also believe we need to make a decision about building a technology center on the Phoenix Center property. You've already laid out a plan. There's already fiber and the ability to do what needs to be done there, just like what we did with Central Warehouse. We chose to make that decision and to build that there because we had the property already existing that we owned. We have the space available to do this type of infrastructure that impacts every single person in every single building, in every single location in Marion County Public Schools. Our technology infrastructure touches us all. Is that the intent, that we need to come to a resolution or an agreement, a consensus on moving forward with that? I'm trying to get us to what we could come to today, because I don't know that we're going to come to all of this today.
Yes, ma'am. And I'd like to add another reason for moving forward with that data center is the current building 2 of the former district office where we have technology auditing and state reporting is currently having to use a portable restroom because of the infrastructure on that site. So we would like to have a consensus so we can bring these items to board. So even if we come to consensus, they all still require board action. But we would like to know the direction we're going.
Okay. And before we get there, because I do think we can at least have a consensus conversation about that in particular, regardless of what we choose to do with moving all of our central offices to somewhere, at least selling those 2 blocks in downtown Ocala would be assets that we could gain some resources from. I do just want to make a general conversation comment about this property we're in right now. Understanding that there are significant infrastructure challenges on this campus, this board member has significant concerns about us not maintaining this auditorium as well as this gymnasium. And I know it doesn't have air conditioning, I know all of that, but just like us having a board meeting in this room has to check a calendar because of all of the other things that happen in this room, while we predominantly have top priority, we know how many 5th grade graduations and bridging ceremony, not graduate, 5th grade ceremonies and bridging ceremonies and all the things, all the media festival, all the things that happen in this auditorium. We're not building auditoriums. We're just not. The most recent auditorium that we built at Forest High School needs significant lighting upgrades, and there's lots of things that are needed there. That's not usually a part of plans, and this is such an asset to all of our schools in Marion and all of our students in Marion County Public Schools. Additionally, that gymnasium, if we don't have it, it causes some significant challenges with some of our other athletic programs and schools that use that for practice facilities. So I have concerns as this individual board member, as we move forward with conversations about potentially selling this property, about inclusive of this auditorium and gymnasium, because we're not currently talking about building replacements. And even if we were to move to a district office site in this new North Magnolia property, even if we do that, the auditorium will be nowhere near the capacity this one is. And we've seen this auditorium packed out for some of those student activities that are vital to this community. So those are my thoughts on that, and I'll open it up if anybody has additional comments about anything there, but then I do want to have conversation about technology facility. Dr. James.
I understand the technology facility piece, I do, and I could get on board with the technology facility piece in an effort to offset the old district office parcel. So I just want to acknowledge that. I want to ask, Mr. Ayers is in the room and a head nod is sufficient, or fingers in the air. How many schools do we have that are sitting between 50 and 75% capacity? 3. Okay. One of those is Reddick Collier. Greenway Elementary, maybe? No? Which ones? Fort McCoy. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say those 2 right now.
Opress borderlines on that at times.
Okay. So I bring it up because we are talking about maximizing the usage of Fordham with district office personnel. And while, as someone who resides on the north end of town, I understand how far Reddick is. That is, people who are not visited could presumably have their office at Reddick Collier Elementary, which is sitting at somewhere close to 50% capacity, I believe. If it's an office space that's not being visited, which was I believe the intention of Fordham, and people who would presumably visit a district office regularly could be at Fordham. So I just don't think that we're having a whole conversation here, because if this whole building were to implode tomorrow, we have vacant availability at some of our schools to absorb district office staff. Is that ideal? No. But it is a solution that would cost little to no money. Certainly not 14 million. So I just think it's important to acknowledge that.
And I understand that, Dr. James. At this point, this board member wants to say welcome to the conversation to Dr. James and Ms. Conrad, because I know that Reverend Cummings and Ms. Thrower had this conversation many times before I joined the board, and then we have had it since I've joined the board as well. We looked at the Sears property. We looked at a property the Star Banner building. That's property. We since I've been on the board, and there was a property that's now becoming apartment complexes behind Woodland Villages that used to be available. Where the 7-Eleven is going in right now. All of those conversations happened. That was when I was a candidate, and so I know that there have been multiple conversations that have happened. What Ms. Dobbins indicated with the buildings that are in poor condition, not also inclusive of the electrical and the plumbing, because your reports are just structural, they're not electrical and plumbing. We know that we have witnessed the plumbing go out in this facility. We also know we've witnessed electrical glitches multiple times in this room. So we know that there are challenges on this specific property. I do understand we have some space that could be utilized at Fordham, at Reddick, at other locations. I don't believe that it could functionally house all of the individuals that would need to have the full district office. I do think that there is additional conversation that needs to occur around a district office. The thing about a letter of intent to me, and that obviously would include board action, but the thing about a letter of intent to me is at least gets us on a fact-finding mission. And we would never have to make a decision without facts in front of us. And at this point, we don't have anything. We have a purchase price, and we've had a couple of walkthroughs that have not had any structural analysis. We don't know how old the roof is. We don't know how old the ACs are. We've seen what the potential water intrusion looks like, but we don't know what that actually is. And some of those things have to happen before we even could consider it. Letter of intent also doesn't cost a ton of money. I mean, we'll have to pay for the inspections, but beyond that, this board member is interested in knowing more about a property that might meet a lot of needs. But that is not separate and apart from all of the other things that we've talked about today. So we kind of have two conversations going on here. I am grateful to hear that there is at least some reception to us moving forward with consensus on a technology center at the Phoenix Center. I would like to hear from the other board members on their thoughts on that. But if we are going to vacate at least 2 blocks in downtown Ocala, we have to move forward with that. And so, board, can I ask for additional thoughts on a technology center construction at on the Phoenix Center property? Vice Chair.
I am in support of the building of that technology center. Years ago, there wasn't even a need for things like that. Now, we go down if we don't have very reliable, very functional technology infrastructure. So to me, that's a no-brainer. The leaseback thing, I would share that we need to be cautious because as a board member, I want to be operating on our timeline, not the timeline of someone that is now pushing us to get out. And now we're underwater on subcontractors because we've taken on too much, too fast. And then we have a domino, that I don't want to play. I do have a question about school construction crews and subcontractors. I feel like it's a little bit different in terms of requirements of people that we have doing that work. And so if someone could speak a little bit about that. That's in conjunction with me as a teacher. I've taught in portables, I've taught in new wings. People have taught in one-room schoolhouses and made great things happen. So I'm completely neutral about where teaching occurs. I'm more about making sure that the tremendous projects that we're taking on are getting done on budget and on time.
I don't know if you have a particular question, Mrs. Thrower would be happy to answer, or if you're just more interested in commentary about the construction field in general when it comes to these. School construction follows a different code in terms of the Florida Building Code than, say, a gas station or a hotel. And so we have more requirements to meet, which of course eventually translates to more cost. Same thing when we talk about shelters or if we talk about hardening. You don't have a series of gates and fences to go buy gasoline or to go to a grocery store, which we would have at our schools. That includes cameras and other things. And all these schools and all these wings would include that. They were even included before the age of a state study saying you had to do these things way back even when Hammond Bowen was built in the later 2000s. We had put fencing in and made provisions for cameras, even if the cameras weren't installed. So I don't know if there's a particular question or a particular concern that you want to have addressed in terms of school construction.
My concern is biting off more than we can chew and having too many projects going on that we can't provide what's needed to get them done on or preferably under budget and on time.
Yeah, the twofold concern from where I sit would be the strain on the subcontractors and the strain on my staff. I have one person that oversees all design, and I have two people in construction. One's field-based, one's contract-based. So that's the three of them would be managing all these. Everybody else is support personnel or inspectors, and I only have two inspectors, and I'm everybody's backup, including when the copy machine goes down. But I think the bigger strain would be on the subcontractors, and of course, we've seen this for the last 3+ years, even before the age of COVID. The economy was picking up speed, and you almost have to order components like doors, electrical equipment, air conditioning equipment before you even break ground, if you even want it on time to put in the building. Otherwise, you've got a shell sitting there for months waiting for these components so you can continue the construction. I think that's the bigger concern. In these larger communities like in Orlando or Tampa, they have so many more choices in terms of availability of equipment. Marion County, Ocala, we're sort of in the center of the state. The next closest large city, if you want to call it that, is Gainesville. And then you've got to travel down to I-4 area to find a community big enough and that's where the bulk of our equipment comes from anyway. We don't manufacture air conditioning here in town. We don't manufacture roofing here in town. A lot of that stuff comes from out of state. It would be a strain. And so we've faced this before, just not faced this economy before. Back in between 2007 and 2010, we built 3 schools, we built 11 classroom wings, and did 4 major renovations within that 3-year span with the same staff we have now. Of course, the way we did it was we staggered everything. We didn't do more than 2 wings at a time, and then we would not start the next batch of wings for another 3 months to allow trades to finish a bank of schools and bid on and be competitive on the next batch. When we did Vanguard and Lakeware High School renovations, those were $32 million a piece, same thing. We staggered them on purpose so that we could order equipment and right behind it, order equipment for the next school so as not to overtax, not so much the manufacturers, but it was even our own staff. When at the time I had 3 inspectors, now I've only got 2. And that's a lot of running around trying to inspect, every aspect of a school. So we would have a plan. Of course, that means that your time frame grows a little bit. If there was a concern that I would say that a lot of it depends on the time frames put on you by your funding. If you've got to have 80% of something spent by a certain time frame, then obviously we'd want to get those going fast so that we can maximize the time and have some breathing room at the end. So there's no magic formula. It's a combination of things that have to fall into place. I can tell you we've done it before, maybe not to this magnitude. And again, it's really the economy. It's getting things. Back then, we didn't have a problem getting doors. There was 4 to 5 weeks out. Now they're 5 to 6 months to get doors. Things that we never had to face before, we're facing now. So I think that's probably the bigger challenge, more so even than talking about a couple schools in a couple of years.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. I just continue to hear, across the community, we can't find good help. We can't find good help. And that is concerning to me. So thank you for sharing. As far as the district building itself goes, it's interesting to me that we sit in the same building that was supposedly not good enough to continue to have a high school in, which is why now we have one on Mary Camp Road. But here we continue to be. I think it does have a lot of merit. I'm glad that we have tossed this around as long as we have, because $42 million just seemed like way too much money. And now we have an opportunity that certainly sounds a whole lot more feasible. To my understanding, all government entities have a main building to gather and always have. They're not under the constraints of, what is the building being used for. It's available to them at any time. I personally don't care. I can put my laptop anywhere, so I don't really have a dog in the fight as far as, you don't need to have square footage for an office for Nancy, I'll tell you that. But I see the merit of having a central location for people to go to get business done and get business conducted. There's nothing worse than having an already upset parent 99 times more upset because now they've had to find their way somewhere through a maze of buildings with terrible signage to finally get to the person that may hopefully be able to solve their problem. So those are my comments on that. As I look at these 6 bullet points, the next steps on slide 51, I think each one of them has merit. I agree with our chair that a letter of intent to get access to that building on Magnolia and take a look at it and see if it's going to meet our needs that's a launching off point. I want to be very careful. I'm not going to name the county, but when I hear about bonds and all those things, you can get into big trouble fast. And I commend our finance department for being very conservative. And I don't consider ourselves to be in a pickle. I consider ourselves to be at a crossroads. We've held out as long as we possibly could. And now we have the information we need. We have the updated data we need. We certainly have the need. So I'm ready to get some things due diligenced, and let's get started. That's where I am with this.
Ms. Conrad.
Mr. Knight, I just had another question that kind of went along with Ms. Thrower's concerns. Do we have, with our subcontractors, are they held to a higher standard? They're working around kids, especially like adding wings. I would see that as being a struggle. Recruiting people that are eligible to be on campus. And so what does that look like as far as recruiting staff to work?
Well, as far as the subcontractors, that's correct. They would have to meet the Jessica Lunsford Act requirements, which means they have an identification badge. They've gone through a level 2 background screening. We don't allow tobacco use in our schools. Obviously, we don't allow a host of other things, things that would be considered a weapon or illegal drugs or alcohol or anything like that. And so it can limit your pool some. We have had situations in the past where the whole crew wants to light up at break time and start smoking, and nope, you can't do that at a school campus. And so they've got to leave the site to go do that. And in a competitive market, that can sometimes make the difference between go out to a field and build a hotel where there's nobody around and nobody really cares, or go to a school and watch my language and watch my behavior and check in every day and don't wear anything on my shirt that might be offensive. And so it can impact. I mean, it probably wouldn't stop a project from happening, but it requires a lot more eyes on the workers, including my staff's eyes, to ensure that put your hard hat on, put your cigarette out, and turn your shirt inside out. And we do find ourselves being, we've been called the fashion police and what have you, but safety is safety, and it is important to protect everybody on that site, not just the workers from their own actions, but obviously the staff, the students, the parents, any visitors that go to that site. We don't want to be thought of before the history lesson is being taught. We want to apparently, or try to be inconspicuous as much as we can. So there are barriers with screens up, but it can have especially in today's market. Most people, they look at schools as a lot of different requirements they don't have in other types of construction. Of course, money talks. So Orange County, Osceola County, Hillsborough County, Pinellas County, Dade County, they're not having a problem finding anybody because they have all this work to do, and folks will come and show up to look at those projects. I think our bigger struggles when we have too few to attract anybody, and then we have all these regulations and requirements, then it makes it less palatable for a contractor to pursue. I would say if we're talking the level of work we've been talking this morning, we probably won't have a major issue attracting, and we're going to have to import subcontractors no matter what. There's only one or two folks in every trade in the Marion County area that could handle something that size. And if you're talking about multiple wings at a time, you're going to have multiple contractors involved, not just one that goes from school site to school site. But to answer your question, it can be a pinch.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Reverend Cummings.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, you haven't spoken
Go
much
ahead.
today.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I wanted to ask Ms. Boston-Ellis if she could clarify. After reading the legislation, it does look like we can put a sales tax on the 2026 general election. I've been looking at the statute here.
Yes, you are correct. That was brought to our attention by our Board of County Commissioner folks that are here today.
Okay.
You could 26.
So we can put a sales tax on the 26th ballot, which would then be opposite of the county commission's 1 cent.
I think the discussion was, when we were talking about this, is when those type of items are put to the community, because we would probably be looking at the referendum that we currently have. Some would see this as competition with the county. Timing is everything.
Mm-hmm.
So while it is permissible, that's just something that you would have to decide on as a board, if that's the right time to do that.
I would offer competing sales taxes on the same ballot is not nearly as ideal as being on separate ballots. That's just my personal opinion on the matter.
That's why I said that would be your decision to make,
Yeah.
not ours. We'll just,
I agree we would be in competition with our own referendum. I understand that. But I don't want to be a board member that puts a half cent up against a 1 cent for the county and presumably asking Republican voters to pick both or pick none or pick one, because if ours gets picked and theirs does not, then I'm presumably co-signing that I think this is more important than roads and fire. So I don't know that I'm comfortable with that personally. So if 26 is an option, I believe it needs to be a part of the conversation. So thank you for that clarification. The other thing I want to offer here, what I've heard over the last 30 minutes or so is conversation about adults using porta potties in the old district office, technology, and poor plumbing and MTI. But we have students who are in classrooms that have buckets catching water. And we have students in classrooms that don't have air conditioning regularly. And those schools that I just mentioned, that I won't name right now, are not anywhere on this plan. So I'm drawing a lot of just real discomfort with the fact that we would prioritize putting the adults in a different place, but not addressing the fact that the children are in a place that is subpar. I have a fundamentally hard time with it, and I'm not for putting a letter of intent and spending. I mean, I just went through purchasing my own 5,000 square foot building in downtown, and I spent $30,000 on inspections and all of the things. So it's not going to be this couple $1,000s to get all of the inspections done we need to know where we stand. And can anyone today tell us how much we would presumably spend to get all of those things taken care of, to give us an idea of what it would cost to refurb the building? Does anyone have that number? No? Okay. So I know what it cost for my 5,000 square foot building, and that was just south of $30,000 to purchase the building where and that was not to the extent of this. So I'm not on board with that until we have a plan to address the other stuff, where the kids are.
Reverend Cummings.
Thank you. We keep going back and forth with all this stuff. We know that our district needs new schools. We know that there are some schools that need some immediate upgrades and maintenance issues. This facility being one of them. As recently, just a couple of weeks ago, I was getting calls about a school, no name, that didn't even have air conditioning on some of the hottest days. So we do have to deal with those issues. But we also need to deal with the issue of moving down the road on some of these things. The technology piece, we can't, if we don't do something with this technology piece, we won't be doing anything at all, moving that building at all. So we do need to look at building this facility, this technology piece, because that's the vital part of us being able to do the work of the district. So we have to figure out how do we, moving forward with that. A couple year or so ago, we had a huge conversation about district offices. And I think that the price tag was thrown out there about $40 million or something. And oh boy, people were in an uproar about that. At some point, we're going to have to make some decisions. We're going to have to do something different because we just keep tossing this ball around. This seems like this is the time that we need to really make some decisions and go forward on getting some things in place. Dr. James brings up some great things about making sure that our kids are, we're here for student outcomes, but we also have to have things in place for the people that are helping to get those student outcomes to where they need to be. So if we're just going to keep meeting and keep talking in circles, then this meeting is doing nothing. But we've got some action items that have been listed, that several things that we need to do, and either we're going to do them or not, guys. We just need to pull on our big boy pants and just do what we need to do and make a decision on where we're going.
Thank you. Vice Chair?
I stepped out for a minute and missed the part about what was shared while I was gone, and speaking, I think I heard about subpar. You know, I don't know. I pray as a district at some point we'll be able to have all brand-new buildings that look like our newest charter school, and that would be great. But I stand by my statement that, you know, it's less about the space than it is about what's occurring within that space. And we've used portables forever. I bet we have students that started being portable, well, maybe not in kindergarten, but pretty much have been in portables, and, you know, it is what it is. So I see that as, just like I said, it's a neutral to me, and it's not going to stop me from supporting moving forward. And as Board Member Cummings just said, you know, just put the pants on and let's get some things done.
Dr. Gullett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the board, a few items I just want to bring forward, just some comments really at this point. I didn't want to interrupt the board's very important and robust discussion on this. It always begins and ends with students, always. I want to be really clear that since I've been in Marion County, on behalf of my whole team, never have we sought out any type of district facility to prioritize the adults. What you see today was a result of an opportunity brought to us to consider, as there have been, and I know that Board Member Cummings said this earlier, other buildings since I've been here that have come to us to please go and look at. So, and this is a long-term conversation. I know with the board members that have been here for some time, even preceding my time in Marion County. There were conversations prior and publicly about a main facility for access to our community, as Vice Chair Thrower has brought forward. So I just want to be really clear about that. We, on behalf of my team, are not actively seeking a better and fancier building. It's just simply, are we being responsible? I know Ms. Dobbins touched on this a bit, and I was going to ask her to talk about it some more, but I don't think we need to. I think we need to get back to the student piece. But the cost, the needs here in this building are of great concern and are costly. So we also have a fiscal responsibility to look at that in terms of dollars and what we're doing. If something comes to us that's more effective and efficient, it's still a dollar figure, but it never prioritizes adults over the students. And then for the purpose of today, really looking at prioritizing what we need and some guidance from the board, there are a lot of moving pieces here today. I mean, this is why we did this in 2 days. We've been long awaiting the results of the long-range plan survey and the information, the data to guide into the conversations, but getting back to the student piece and prioritizing the request and the need for guidance in these ever-moving pieces. It's a big puzzle. Would be really helpful and important for us to take guidance from the board on what we need to do next. So everything doesn't have to be decided today. We tried to bring everything as transparently as possible and as thoroughly as possible to you for consideration, but certainly having a prioritization of guidance would be really important. And I don't know if, Madam Chair, if the board would like us to go back over those priority needs, or if you have enough information that you can provide some direction to us. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to take us all to slide 50 that does say next steps and kind of tick off what we can today. We've already addressed the impact fee ordinance. The school surtax request would be additional conversation we need to have based on what I've heard today. One of the recommendations that I heard that has not been discussed, and something that, just for a point of clarification, the majority of school boards that I know that have some kind of sales tax like that they're receiving actually are receiving a portion of a 1-cent sales tax. Previous school boards did not ask our county to go in on that with them. Before that does come up on the ballot again, we potentially could make a request to ask for a quarter of that 1 penny that's the county's receiving. May not be a request that is met with high regard, but it is an opportunity that was presented today that has not been brought forth. In addition to us putting up our own half-cent, those two conversations are two different recommendations, certainly. I believe we had consensus. I think I heard from everyone except Ms. Conrad that we would like to move forward with putting a technology building on the Phoenix Center property. Ms. Conrad saying yes. And so I think we can get that moving forward, team. We understand that that we need greater technology infrastructure, and building something new actually will help us in that regard significantly. We have the property, we have the space, and then once we have that under construction and underway with a timeline, it also helps us vacate a property that we would be able to use as an asset for sale at some point. Vice Chair Thrower.
Thanks. I just getting back to the school surtax request, what's the timeline that you need ideally from the board for that? I have some of my own thoughts, but I'd just like to know, is that something that you really need consensus from us today?
Based on what our previous timeline was when we did the referendum, I believe it doesn't have to happen until at least the beginning of 2024 for us to come to. Certainly, if we're going to move forward with asking to share a portion of, then that's a conversation that we have to have offline separately with individual commissioners if that's something that we're wanting to do. But if we wanted to do our own half cent in the 2024 cycle, I think we have a couple of months that we could at least have that conversation.
So we don't have to do that today?
No, I don't believe so.
Yeah, it doesn't have to happen today, but I need to get with Mr. Wilcox and I'll need to get with Mr. Minter in order to start that process.
So at least to give us a calendar.
Right.
So we would know if we were to pursue a 2024 ballot initiative, what that timeline would look like. So thank you for bringing that up. So that takes care of our little number one here. We have one of them taken care of and one of them to be continued. The loan procurement agreement is something on here as a next step. Some of this conversation for me, which I know that it may take us a little, so first of all, we understand that we have and I'm speaking just as an individual board member, we have a timeline of 2025, 2026. We know that it's going to take about 2 years or so to build elementary schools. If we are going to move forward with building elementary schools, I'm a little hesitant to move forward with loan procurement until we know if we actually are going to have an impact fee. And we won't know that until our county votes one way or the other. And we have to have 2/3 vote by our county commission to make that decision for us. And so some of this challenge for us right now is not in our hands as far as the funding streams and funding sources. Ms. Boston Ellis, thank you.
Just to clarify for the bond procurement agreement, this would be after the board decides what projects you want to move forward with now for your schools. So if it's renovation or building new schools, the unfunded maintenance, all of those decisions would need to be made by the board, and then facilities and finance would come and say, this is what we need to finance, this is what we don't have funds for now, and we would build that timeline. So we would, all of the decisions on the board on what projects you want to move forward with for the schools, once those decisions are made, then we would figure out the timing. And just for general information, normally from start to finish, we can get the funds in hand in about 3 months. So once you say go, then we would come back to you. So these are conversations that nothing on that needs to be done today. There's still a lot more decisions for you guys to make before we would even get into looking at bonding right this moment.
Okay, thank you. So it appears these potentially are out of order, that we would need to do construction management selection ahead of conversation about loan procurement. Let's have conversation board about letter of intent. How do we feel about moving forward with at least having conversation about that property in the Magnolia District? Vice Chair.
I would like to be kept apprised of, what the costs are running for that building. There's a lot of opinions about this, and there always has been and there always will be. So in the interest of transparency, I think it would be my request to be kept apprised. I think Dr. James raised a good point. She just bought a building, she shared how much it cost her. Hopefully it'll be less for us. I don't know. But I would like to know, how that's looking and what you find when you go in there, and whether it's really going to be viable before we spend, too much due diligence money. So that's where I am on that one. I want to jump back up to the school surtax thing. I'll end up, I think, being a lot more comfortable just keeping our tax in-house with us. If we need a half-cent sales tax to do what we want to do, then we make that case to the community as the Marion County School Board. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with asking the county commission, to share portions of something that they have had to state their own case for things that they need. So that's just some initial thoughts on that. I know we don't have to have that larger conversation till later, but I just wanted to give you all a little preview of where my brain is on that one.
Thank you. So my understanding, Ms. Dobbins, perhaps you or Mr. Knight could come back to us and let us know what costs would be for us to actually do inspections on that building, because I think that's where part of the question is. If we did submit a letter of intent, certainly that is no obligation whatsoever that we would be purchasing, all contingent on the inspections and pricing, lots of different factors there, the appraisal, all of those kinds of things that you would feel comfortable with us having in hand to make a decision. But all of those things also come at a cost. So if we're talking it's going to cost us $50,000 to $75,000 for us to even begin to find out this information, then we are getting into potentially waters we may not be wanting to go into. But if you can get some of those numbers for us and find out how much some of that would cost us before we make a decision to move forward with letter of intent. Agreed?
Yep.
Okay. So do we want to have construction management conversations? We heard from Dr. James that she would like for us, at least if I'm understanding correctly, to move forward with some of our unfunded projects and prioritize those in the first 5 years. Dr. James, is that prioritizing those over the new constructions?
No, I want to go forward with the plan that Ms. Dobbins' department put forth for the first 5 years, which is 2 elementary schools and 2 wings. Is that correct? I think. I could have it jumbled, but.
No problem. Yes, for elementary, it's 2 schools, 2 wings. For middle school, it's 2 wings. For high school, it's 1 high school.
So I would like to move forward with what Ms. Dobbins just suggested.
Me too.
And in addition, I would like to move forward with 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5 wings on slide 45 that are the lower density growth new construction.
Those are unfunded?
Which are currently unfunded. And then I would like to move forward with the unfunded remainder for the next 5 years, which is 297, 576, 715.
I can't come to consensus on that. I agree with the 2 schools and the 2 wings and the high school for openers. That's where I am.
And I agree, individual board member speaking, I appreciate the plan as presented with the new, when we're starting to talk about unfunded, and I appreciate them for sure. It starts becoming a cost factor to me to understand where those dollars are coming from. And we heard kind of how the dollars would, but when you're talking moving up a 10-year plan to in your 5 years, then it becomes a timing issue on when certain things, we can't, in my opinion, we can't build 2 new elementary schools if we're also building wings on elementary schools that were intended in years 6 through 10, if 1 through 5 is when, it becomes a timing issue on debt and money.
Which goes back to maybe an hour or more now, where I said, what is the number? What is the number? So what I just said totals 600 million. I think that's where we got an hour or more now ago. And so what my question was, and I don't believe we got to an answer, is we're going to get 300 million if we did a 20-year structure on the millage, and then we're looking at how much impact fee would we get? And no one knows that number.
Right.
So if no one is going to know that number, then we can't approve even the Benesh plan. And so because the Benesh plan for the first 5 years equals how much?
It's the two different numbers that we have here on slide, whatever the slide number is. But also keeping in mind, while no one knows the number based on the number of permits, no one knows if the county is going to approve it at 100% either.
But we're not making the decision today to vote on it. So we're moving forward with a consensus, but the county would presumably be voting on this on the 20th. So we don't have to vote on approving it until after the county would a vote or not vote, 100% or not. But my question is, if we're going to say we can't do the unfunded 5-year growth plan, and that includes those 5 school sites, because we don't know what impact fees are, then why are we saying we can do the entire Benesh plan? Because the Benesh plan, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Benesh plan is more than the $245 million that is highlighted on slide 49.
We'll go back to slide 36 to answer your slide 49 question. So the Benesh, remember, offered 4 scenarios, and we recommended somewhere between those 4 scenarios. So in the first 5-year plan, which was the 2 elementary schools, 2 wings for elementary school, 2 wings for middle, and then the high school, that's your 2023-28 at 208.2. And then the 29-33 is the Benesh for the wings, and then the 34-38 is projected the 15-year out. Remember, for 29 moving forward, we would need reassessment. And then the 100.2 million was for the wings that are listed that Dr. James is referencing for those elementary schools and middle schools at $100.2 million.
So right now, we could take on slide 49, the first highlighted 15-year structure for the millage and cover the first 5-year plan of what the consultant put forward to us. Is that correct?
Monetarily, yes. Remember, if we bond, then that money must be used 80% of that, and it goes back, and I prefer not to speak to the financial piece. I just want to remind that we have timelines of the use of that money.
Well, we have 3 years, I understand, right? And so
Yes.
80% of 245 is 196, right?
Correct. And I just do want to point out for the impact fees, and I think that this was mentioned previously, that that's going to new growth, new capacity. So the 1.5 mils can be used for anything, for, your renovations of current existing facilities, new construction as well. And so the impact fees would go to that new growth. So once the decision's made with the county, in the decision moving forward with the board for the impact fees, and we would know this before we were doing any sort of bonding. If projects were mixed in, either the 15 or 20-year structure for 245 or 300 million, those projects can be delineated if you want it just for new capacity and use impact fees to reimburse that debt as it comes in on that, or if it's additional revenue sources in there. So I just do want to make certain that the impact fees, when those are coming in, they would just be for that new growth.
Yes. So, assuming impact fees go forward at 100% through the Board of County Commission, over 15 years, we would be looking at collecting an estimated $525 million. So, what I want to put forth, personally, this board member, is the first 5-year plan that Benesh brought forward. That's the 2 elementaries, the wings, that whatever, the high school. I won't even reiterate it all. We all know what it is. And then what I would like to see added to that is addressing some of that $500 million, which we have in deferred maintenance, which looks at those 5 school sites. That's what I would like to see addressed. And Ms. Boston Ellis can speak to the comfortability, assuming impact fees passed, of covering that 300 million, because essentially that would be a roughly 300 million for those 2 items.
Chair,
Vice Chair.
I could get behind the statement.
Could you please repeat I heard my name, and that was
Okay.
it.
So
What is
we're
your
looking at
request?
200 million essentially for the first 5-year plan from Banesh, and 100 million to cover the deferred, unfunded, low-impact growth costs. We're looking at 308 million essentially. What I would like to say is this board member is if you are comfortable presuming impact fees went forward with the Board of County Commission, are you comfortable with moving forward with a plan that encompasses about $300 million in cost?
We are allowed, like I said before, we are allowed to procure debt for, I think Ms. Howell said up to 300 million comfortably. So I guess what I'm hearing you say is that we borrow the money first and see where we are before we move forward with impact fees. Impact fees are hard to tie down because it depends on if the property is actually built out, and we don't get the funds until there is, I think it's a CO is done. That's when we get the funds. So what you're looking at today is an overall plan. It's an overall projection of what we believe as a district that we need, and then what the potential funding sources are. So it just depends on what the board wants to do. Then we'll go forward and provide financing for you. I think you're sort of asking questions that we don't have answers for yet until we see the plan, and then we can say, because of this plan, we can procure this $300 million in debt. We feel comfortable that that we're going to have COs in, and we'll start receiving impact fees of so many dollars. Even when we did it before, David would trace those types of activities, and it's not like a lot of money starts coming in. But we're just trying to plan for the next 15 years. And you can change it all around and tell us what you want to do after you come to consensus, and we'll go back and reevaluate it. But this is basically our response to a request from the board. And you can amend it, change it, and we'll amend and change what we need to do.
So from this board member's seat, what I would like then, my suggestion would be to ask for, because if we're going to include the technology data center at $6.5 million, so we're looking at closer to $315 million total. And I would like to see us start there. That's what I would be comfortable as a board member with, us starting there. And when we see impact fees start coming through, or we see the flow of money, we can reassess in 3 or 4 years and come up with a further plan. And as Ms. Dobbins said multiple times, we're going to have to reassess the plan for year 5 to 10 and 10 to 15 regardless. But I know that I can certainly not say that what I'm suggesting, which is what Banesh offered for the first 5 years, plus Lake Weir Middle and the 4 other schools or 5 other schools, that all needs to happen, regardless of whether we find additional funding sources, whether impact fees go through or not, whether we get a sales tax or not. What we're discussing has to happen, and we have to figure out how to pay for it. Like, we can't not do it. It has to happen. So I don't know that what I'm asking of you as our CFO is, are we going to be, and it seems like 300 is about the number that our financial advisor has said we could safely be, then I think we need to make a decision, borrow about that much money, and move forward with a plan, and then we can really be super grateful and happy if these other funding sources roll in, but we have to address this no matter what. We have to move forward no matter what, regardless of impact fees or sales tax or anything else. So this board member is asking for the first 5 years of Benesh plan plus the low impact growth list, that's 100 million, and the technology center. That's what I'm asking. So it's about 315 million.
Thank you, Dr. James. I wanted to just point out that the 100.2 million does include, as you just stated, a replacement for Lake Weir Middle School, which if in fact we move forward with what Dr. James has recommended and inclusive in this first 5 years of this plan, go ahead and build that replacement, then that becomes an additional asset that we have that we'll be vacating. And I don't know what would be happening in that part of the community, but we would be vacating yet another property in its entirety if we were to build that replacement. That's the only thing that had not been discussed thus far, because all these other things are additions onto existing buildings, and we're going to maintain those spaces. But this 100 million that Dr. James is speaking of in unfunded projects in the first 5 years includes a replacement school. So that potentially if in fact we move forward with that recommendation, that also potentially in the 5-year time frame becomes another asset that we potentially could sell. Just making that as a statement.
Great point.
Vice Chair.
That's a great point. And again, I will reiterate that it's all needed, but I'm very hesitant about, yes, it almost sounds like getting the money is almost going to be easier than being able to stick to our timeline and procurement and making sure that all this can really get done in the first 5 years. I could get behind increasing the emphasis and the priority on the lower density growth, buildings, and depending on how we're doing, getting those added in more quickly than 10 years, sure. But I want to be really careful that we're not biting off more than we can chew. And I think that this plan was presented in a very deliberate and conservative way, which I appreciate. So I'm a little hesitant, although, to piecemeal it up. I do like the idea about the Lake Weir Middle, because that will free up an asset. So I do think that is definitely something to think about. But for today's discussion, I'd love to get us to a point where we can provide some directives and wrap this up.
Okay, and I also want to say thank you for including the information about our debt service currently, because if we move forward with nothing else and we don't do anything today and we don't incur any additional debt, in the next 5 years we'd be out of debt. So it's good to know we have 35 million in debt right now, but if we didn't do anything today, in 5 years from now we'd be debt free. Okay, and now we're talking about potentially incurring another $315 million in debt. Board, which parts of this can we get behind from a construction management selection of various projects that we might be able to come to consensus on today? So staff has some directives as to what to come back to us next. I have heard from Dr. James and from Vice Chair Thrower that we can potentially move forward with the Benesh recommendations of the 5-year plan with the 2 elementary schools and 1 high school and the 2 wings. I did hear that.
Sure.
Do we have consensus, Reverend Cummings?
I concur.
Concur, okay. We have consensus on moving forward with the Benesh plan with that for the 5 years.
Well, just to clarify, our staff's interpretation and recommendation of the Benesh plan.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. Yes, that middle ground.
Yes. So understanding, we haven't signed the first contract. We haven't agreed to the first anything. We're giving you consensus to explore that part so that we can explore the funding streams, understanding that we will know more about impact fees by the end of this month. And so we have consensus on at least exploring what we have been presented today.
Madam Chair, may I interrupt?
Yes, Dr. Gullett.
Could Ms. Dobbins come forward and just want to make sure that we're clear about what that direction is? There's been a lot of discussion on the staff's recommendation based on that plan. Just, thank you.
Based on the district's recommendations, which are from the findings of the Benesh study, you're recommending that we move forward exploring the funding for 2 new elementary schools, 2 new elementary wings, 2 middle school wings, and 1 high school in the next 5 years.
Correct.
Yes, that is correct.
For my reference, is that identified on particular slides that encompass everything you're talking about?
They are.
If so, let's
It's on slide.
name them so we can
3 slides, yes.
refer back
Starting with
to.
Slide 5, correct, Ms. Dobbins?
45.
Yes, you can also go to slide
33,
33.
5 and 33?
Slide 33 has the first 5-year plan with the cost. We've also come to consensus on the technology center.
Yes.
Yes.
Move forward with the technology center. You definitely have consensus to move forward with that.
So then I would like to ask if I have other board members willing to move forward with Bellevue Middle, Harborview Elementary, Ocala Springs Elementary, Ward Highlands Elementary, Maplewood Elementary, and the new middle DD Site F, which would be the replacement for Lake Weir Middle, which is $100 million.
I agree.
I ask if we could have that conversation delayed until July. I personally just want to know where this impact fee thing comes out before we explore another $100 million in debt. That's a personal opinion, but
I could take that recommendation from our chair because I certainly do support those projects. So I would like to get more information and then have another conversation about that in July. But it is my desire to accelerate that if we can and do our best to make that happen.
Some of those projects have been on.
For a long time.
Ms. Storer, you and I came in 18, and they've been there since 18.
And before
5 years later.
Yep.
So we need to, if you're going to bring it back before a conversation, it needs to come back before a conversation, and we need to deal with it.
Which is
Because that's 5 years, a long time. We've been talking about Lake Weir Middle School.
Yes.
It's not getting better.
well, that's why I'm, regardless of whether the impact fee comes forward, we're talking about things that need to be addressed. And our financial advisor very conservatively has said that we can absorb $300 million in debt. That's at 50%, right? The number was 50%? I don't know, 50% of what? I don't know, because that's not my arena, but I know it was 50%, right? Yes, I see a head nod. So, well, can you clarify, was it 50 or 80?
It depended on what came in.
We can absorb up to 75%.
Correct,
But for credit rating purposes, it was 50%.
And that number in the slide is which one?
50%.
That's what I thought.
50% of the 1.5 mils, legally, you're allowed to go up to 75%. For ongoing maintenance needs, we don't like to go above. For credit ratings, for changes in the legislature, sharing with potential charters coming in. The 80% is when you do a bond issuance, you need to expect to reasonably spend 80% of those funds in 3 years.
So would it be responsible to say that 300 million number is a rather conservative number when we're looking at it being 50% when 75% is what legislation allows?
You could, yes.
Okay. So what I'm offering is, as Reverend Cummings just pointed out, how long have we been talking about Lake Weir Middle School? Like ever. So,
Referendum, and what year was that? The referendum cup?
We've been talking about all of this for a really long time.
so my point is, regardless of the impact fees, I believe that those 6 things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, have to be addressed, no matter what. No matter what, they have to be addressed. And so I would just, I am very cautious of this board waiting until July, which, and then we have the conversation again, and then it's just, it keeps dragging and dragging and dragging, and then all of it, and I think we have been in a habit of that. I think that the proof would be that, how long has Lake Weir Middle been on the plan?
Longer than the district office conversation has been on the plan, and that's also been on the plan for at least 5 to 6 years. So, I mean, I understand what the conversation is about this board, previous board.
Correct.
I don't want to say this board. I'll say previous boards have continued to have conversations. This board, I believe, has shown pretty strong diligence that we will get conversations done and get things checked off our list. While I would say, again, I completely agree as an individual board member that these items absolutely have to be addressed. As a fiscally responsible conservative, I want to ensure that I know that we have a funding stream that is at least addressing part of it apart from debt. And that's the only reason I would delay the consensus until July, because by June 20th, we will know a whole lot more than we know today on May 31st.
Perhaps, Chair,
Yes, Vice Chair.
we could all commit as a board to having that conversation in July and making a decision.
Absolutely. I commit to that wholeheartedly. That the conversation will occur and there will be a decision made on this board member's part. But I want to make that decision inclusive of understanding whether or not we have an additional funding stream apart from debt. That's how I personally feel. So that means we don't have consensus to move forward with that today, but our work session in July is scheduled for what date? We will go ahead and add it to the work session agenda.
If
Vice Chair.
if everybody can get behind that. I mean, I don't think that anyone sitting here is not ready to make things happen. There's just a little bit of wiggle room requested between today and a month from now. Not even a month from now. Well, probably a month from now.
Seeing that we don't have consensus, that's the only option anyway. So that's, there's no consensus
Yeah,
on
but
that.
it'd be nice to walk away from the table feeling good about it.
Well, I mean, we do have a work session, no, I guess the next one is July 20th. Is that correct? Is that the only one we have in July? I mean, I would be fine with moving up a work session, having one June 29th.
I'm not available after June 20, okay. Whenever that board meeting is, I'm going out of town for 10 days.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, if we wanted to have a meeting, you know.
When is our next regularly scheduled one? Because
July
people go
20th.
on vacation and all kinds of stuff in July.
July 20th is the next scheduled work session based on the calendar I see.
Can we put it as a work session item on July 20th and make the decision? I mean, I don't know.
We also have a special school board meeting that day, and that's when we receive the tentative budget.
All helpful and important.
Right. Dr. Gullett.
If I may, Madam Chair, as well, if that's the topic for July 20th, we're happy to accommodate that. My request would be what you would desire from the operations team in terms of presentation. I know that the board would have discussion over those items, but I just want to clarify what the request would be of my team to present.
I believe the only request would be to show this slide we have right here, as well as what the approval and/or how the county commission landed on June 20th. We need to know what that projection is based on what the impact fee calculation projection could be.
Okay, thank you.
But we won't have that number until after June 20th. So, okay. Is there anything else that we need to check off this list today? Because
We didn't confirm consensus on an LOI.
Okay.
On what?
We are
The LOI, we didn't come to consensus on.
right, and the information we gave to Ms. Dobbins was to come back to us with information on the costs associated with inspection and/or appraisal.
When will that happen?
Well, we have a work session on June 15th, perhaps.
June 15th?
We do have a work session on June 15th.
That one is for the impact fee. I thought it had to be,
No, the impact fee conversation is happening on June 12th.
Yeah.
June 15th is an administrative briefing and work session that we just scheduled.
oh, yes.
Ms. Dobbins, do you believe by June 15th you could have information to us regarding those two items?
We can either do it then, or we can send it out through email once we know the cost of the inspections and the appraisals. And by statute, we would have to have 2 appraisals.
So if you can get costs associated with that, if we can add to the June 15th agenda for us to have conversation about the information Ms. Dobbins will be sending us.
Or on the 12th, even better.
Or the 12th, we can't do it then. We have to, the 12th has to be isolated specifically for, doesn't the 12th have to be specifically for
We can do,
extraordinary?
we can do more than one thing on that date.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
Separate
I won't
agenda
be-
item. Now, that being said, that also means that for proper notice and advertising and everything of the agenda, the 7-day time for the 12th is going to be, the 5th.
Monday, right.
So that would require that if there are documents that need to be uploaded or anything, that at least a placeholder happen, and then permission of the board chair given perhaps at this meeting or in the future for them to upload additional information as it comes to them.
So without knowing how long it's going to take Ms. Dobbins to get all the information she needs to collect for us, June 12th or 15th, preferably the 12th, if you have the information by June 5th, so that we can have it posted for publication. So,
I want to offer a point of
yes,
question.
Dr. James.
It's more than just the appraisal cost, though, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, are we going to need, phase 1 or phase 2 environmental on that property to purchase it?
So to begin this, we would need to do the inspections and get you the cost of what the inspections would cost, and then also look at the cost of the 2 appraisals. That's the first step. Then can wrap behind if we want to move forward from there on next steps.
So my point of caution is that I don't believe, while I can appreciate that the cost of the 2 appraisals and the inspection is the starter cost, that is not necessarily going to be the cost to get us to the finish line at all. And so that's where I'm struggling, because there's going to be a gap, which there could presumably be a lot of money to get to the end. That's just going to be the cost to open the door. So, Mr. Hurley, or can someone share, would we need a phase 1 or a phase 2 environmental? Would we need a lead and water, test? Would we need those things? Because those are all significant costs that I think should be a part of what is brought forth to us.
So, Madam Chair, yes, any purchases that I've been involved with over the 17 years at the district, that we've had a phase 1, at least a phase 1. And then also you could throw in a survey there. I mean, the survey is nominal, but it's another required part. So you find out certain things when you get a survey done.
And is the phase 1 cost tied to the square footage of the facility? So the cost of the phase 1 variable based on how large the facility is?
That I'm not sure of. I couldn't say if I just don't recall, or, I can recall one instance we were investigating a relatively small property up in the north part of the county, and it just turned out that as it went along, we found out there had been a gas station there. So there were tanks in the ground.
Up by Anthony, right?
Yes, right in front of Anthony Elementary School.
So
It seemed like it was
if we're
gonna be
talking
so
about North Magnolia, I don't know about history up there.
Understood. So I'm just saying that the 2 appraisals and an inspection cost is great to have, but the cost is going to need to include more than just that. And I don't believe that bringing forward just those 3 items is going to be sufficient to tell this board how much it's really going to cost to get to the finish line on that building. A survey, a mold remediation test, a phase 1. There's a variety of things that are going to need to be a part of that clear picture, other than just the cost of 2 appraisals and an inspection.
So anything that we would need.
I think that's what this board is looking for, right? Is how much is it going to cost to close on that property, right? Because if we're going to enter into an LOI,
That's not entirely, I mean, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I thought we were going to at least get some rough costs on how much it would cost us to go into an LOI, and then all the LOI would be contingent on the findings of the things that we would be potentially approving to pay for.
Right.
So,
With phase one environmental assessment, which she's talking about, and it's a very good point, is that's initially just sort of a screening tool. And then phase two, if things are detected on phase one that give rise to a general suspicion that phase two may be required, that's a much more in-depth analysis. And so things can be written so that they're contingent upon passage of X of the phase one, phase two.
but the cost of the phase one should be a part of what is presented to this board to put in an LOI. So that's what I'm trying to say.
sure, and I'm confident that Ms. Dobbins and Mr. Hurley, they're not going to present us something that's halfway done. I mean, they understand what they're going to be presenting to us as far as something that will get this board to a comfortable place of an LOI.
Okay, 5 minutes ago, we were said 2 appraisals and an inspection. It didn't, until I brought up phase one, no one had said phase one. So I'm sorry, but no one had even mentioned that or a survey.
Ms. Dobbins?
Based on conversations had, we will bring back inspection cost, appraisal cost, phase one environmental cost, survey cost, and we will look into the need for a mold remediation test and what that would cost. Those will be estimate cost that would hopefully be able to lead you in the direction of discussion you need to have moving forward. We will do our very best to have that done by June 5th so we can make it available.
Thank you, Ms. Dobbins, Vice Chair.
Yes, and as you move through a transaction, if there's something that catches our attention that we're like, oh, like the Anthony example was a perfect one, then we just stopped. You know, there's some things you just don't pay for in advance until you have other things secured. So thank you, Ms. Dobbins.
And again, this is not us spending a dime. This is us getting information on how much money potentially would cost if we were to go into an LOI. Because from what I understood from this board, and I saw a couple of heads nod, we did not want to go into an LOI until we had this information. And we still don't know if we'll go into an LOI, but we'll at least make a decision with facts. So that was where we landed on the LOI. Is there any additional conversation on any next steps that the staff has prepared for board action today? Which is slide 50. Because I think we've come to consensus on various aspects. Staff, if you want to ensure you have all of the information that you need from us, you're welcome to make sure that you have received the consensus on the items that you needed to today.
To the degree that it becomes for the future, I just want to remind the board that if any of those next steps recommendations do include disposition of property that is real property currently in our possession, there are some additional steps that need to be taken, specifically along the lines of offering them to charter schools, also in making sure that they're not currently encumbered by bonds. We have a leasing corporation, which is this board sitting in a separate capacity, and that leasing corporation has many of those items are held as guarantees against bond. So there's a little bit of a process involved in disposing of properties. It has to be rendered not necessary for educational use. There's a number of factors. So not that those can't happen quickly, but they're necessary preconditions under the law.
Thank you, Attorney Powers. So I believe what we had today was the one that we definitely said let's list and get moving on is the central warehouse property, because we know beyond a shadow of a doubt we'll be vacating that for the most part with a small contingency of employees that can be hopefully transferred to another location. But that will be vacated in the next 3 to 5 months. And so that would be the first property that we want to work towards all of the aspects that you just indicated that need to be done for us to remove that from our property rules. So, anything else? Dr. Gullett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's been a lot of conversation. I would just like to ask Ms. Dobbins come forward and recap next steps, if you don't mind, Board. I think it's important for clarity so that we're all on the same page and we can make sure that we fulfill the Board's desire. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I would like to recap next steps that were presented and given consensus. So again, the 5-year plan based on Vanessa's study, but it's our recommendations. We're moving forward with those. I'm not going to go through those if those are okay, but we're going to move forward with the exploring of the funding for those. We will come back on July 20th and have discussion on the lower density growth that Dr. James has presented with commentary, and have more discussion on those then. We will also bring you, hopefully we'll have projections of impact fees for that July 20th. Also want to point out that the board did give consensus for us to move forward with the new technology data center construction, so you'll see information coming up for board action on those items. What I didn't have clarification on is at one point when we talked about the $300 million for our bonding and so forth, we had mentioned the unfunded maintenance of $297 million. So keeping in mind that if we are increasing our debt service, we are lowering the amount in the capital outlay for maintenance. So I just wanted direction on whether or not we are including the exploration of that procurement for funding to include the unfunded portions of the 5-year plan on maintenance. So unfortunately, we still need clarification on that from the board.
Chair,
Dr. James?
could that be a part of the conversation we have in July when we have the impact fee results?
Yes, if we can postpone that until we have impact fee vote results, that would be when we can make that decision.
Wonderful. Thank you. So for district action also, as stated before, we'll bring back the cost of inspections, appraisals, phase 1 environmental survey, and mold remediation test. Hopefully we'll have that information ready for the June 12th, June 15th board meeting. At this point, the board's own actions will involve the impact fee and the surtax that you will have discussion on. And I believe that concludes the recap.
And just because I was writing as you were talking, and that while this was not necessarily for you, but that was also inclusive of the ordinance language that Attorney Powers is going to be working on with Attorney Mentor about, so that we have all that squared away in the next 5 days.
What are you asking for?
No, just the ordinance language. I know that we've scheduled meetings that we're going to hold, but we also have a county commission timeline that we have to have all that language done by June 8th. So that wasn't necessarily a part of your report, but that is something I want to make sure is inclusive
Of the recap.
of the recap, something that we know will be worked on. Yes.
Yeah, yes, I will be working on it. I'll get with Mr. Hurley because he probably has some prior, Mr. Hurley and perhaps also Ms. Boston Ellis may have some prior draft samples of ones we've used and get started down that path and speak with Mr. Mentor.
Perfect. We've covered a lot today. I wanted to make sure that everything that we had agreed to is in process. Vice Chair, did you have a question?
Just, I think I remember through all of the gyrations of properties and buildings we were looking at previously that we did also get some of this information that you're now going to be getting on this other building ahead of time as well, because anytime you delve in and begin to explore a potential purchase, there's going to be cost. So I feel like we have done that in the past, which in my mind is important. That's all.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. On the conversation that we're holding for the $300 million bonding on the maintenance, for what date are we holding that discussion to be held? July 20th or June 15th?
July 20th.
So we've given consensus on the 200 million of it for them to move forward with funding options for that. The conversation for the 100 million remaining is on July 20th.
As well as
The
other 300 million, which is in the 5-year deferred maintenance.
Correct.
Right, that's what I was.
Right. Yes. That will be July 20th conversation,
Thank you.
which is the same day we're approving the tentative budget. We're having our special meeting.
Money, money,
about
money.
that. Be a big money day. Okay. Any additional comments on this particular from the board or Dr. Gullett. I'd now like to open it for public comment. Is there any public comment on the school and district facility recommendations for 2023 through 2038? Seeing and hearing none, I'll now bring it back to the board and any additional comments. Is there anything from the board clerk's office?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Attorney Powers?
Just that tomorrow we do have an attorney-client work session as well, or attorney-client session first thing in the morning, so we'll convene here and then go from there.
Thank you. Dr. Gullett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, just to thank the board for your feedback and questions and discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. James?
I'm glad we've gotten to this point, and I think we've had some productivity today, lots of productivity. So I look forward to continuing to work on this and work with the Board of County Commission to come up with some funding sources. So thank you.
Thank you. Reverend Cummings?
Thank you to all of you guys that presented this morning. Very long presentation. We just need to quit talking about it and just do what we need to do. So, no further comments.
Thank you. Ms. Conrad?
Just quickly, I want to thank Ms. Dobbins and your team for the preparation that went into this program this morning. I appreciate the time and dedication you put into it, and I look forward to further conversation with our community partnerships as we move forward. I just feel Marion County has been, lack of a better word, stagnant for a while when it comes to facilities. And so I am looking forward to recovering from the 17-year drought that we have experienced here as part of our educational journey. And so thank you to everyone who's been part of the conversation, and I look forward to being a small piece as we move forward.
Thank you, Ms. Conrad. Vice Chair Thrower?
Well said, Board Member Conrad. I don't know that I can put anything on top of that, but I continue to just be appreciative of the talent, the professionalism, and the collaboration of everyone, and especially the folks in this room today. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and I agree. Ms. Conrad, you pretty much nailed that. The drought that we've been in stagnant. You used some good words there. The 17 years that we've been
wandering in the desert.
Wandering in the desert. Thank you to the team. Certainly, this has been a long time coming, and we're grateful for the work that you all have put forth in this, and grateful also to those in the audience who have participated with us in this work session today. Just a reminder, as Attorney Powers said, tomorrow we do begin the morning with an attorney-client session, but then we also have a full agenda on our work session, inclusive of 2023 updates and 2024 funding projections, general insurance renewal presentation, the Code of Student Conduct revisions, the student progression plan, secondary instructional materials for adoption, proposed district staffing plan, etc. So tomorrow will be a full day board, and I look forward to seeing you again for the third day in the row. With that, we are adjourned. Yes, sir. Okay, before I conclude. Yes, sir.
I do want to thank County Commissioner Stone and her team for being here this morning, the whole time. So we appreciate you guys being here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Always good to see you, Commissioner Stone. And with that, we are adjourned at 12:47 p.m. Thank you.